Hey everyone, you're listening to the official podcast of 4playernetwork.com. Check us out at that address for everything you need to know about our community, monthly giveaways, and nightly live streams. You can even support us on Patreon at patreon.com/4player. And last but not least, you can catch the live recordings of these podcasts every single Thursday night on our Twitch channel. We hope to see you there. Enjoy.
We've been ready to go.
All right. Book it. Hey everyone, welcome to 4Player Podcast. This is episode 745. It's February 3rd, 2023. I'm your host, Nick Henderson, joined tonight, like last week, by Brad Simons.
Hello.
And Christopher Davis.
Hi, so we weren't going to do a sound test, right?
Oh, fuck me, Dad. You're right. I
We could just make it part of the podcast. I mean, it's so casual anyways. Let's just mask it. Like, you know.
You're right.
Wait.
Fuck it. You're right. We just did the sound test. That was it. That was the sound test.
I was saying you could say like hi to me and I'll say hi back, you know, or you can ask me something and I'll answer you. But we'll just pretend it's like a podcast thing, but then we'll pause like an extra second.
Okay.
It's too no. This is perfect. This has been synonymous with our personality for like over a decade. Just the sheer unprofessionalism. Is that a word? Unprofessionalism? Just like doing it live. Yeah, like that's what we do. That's how we made our name for ourselves. Just doing it live. So that's what we're doing. Anyways, guys, we're coming to you, of course, from the ice cold heart of Texas in Austin. And if you're not aware, we just got hit with another fucking horrible ice storm.
No,
or a winter storm.
Hold on.
Okay. Winter storm.
Here's what I don't understand. Whatever. We're Texans. It was still like 30 degrees and a little bit of rain. But here's my question. And yes, of course, catastrophic for us here in Texas. But like, there's other places where that's just normal weather, right?
Right. Oh, so much lower is much normal.
Are there trees like different than ours, or are they all like falling apart every time?
First of all, yes, of course they're different than ours.
Yeah, they just have like winter-friendly trees, right?
Yeah.
So they don't all die and fall to the ground like they do here.
I left my house for the first time since Monday today, and they're just everywhere. Just before I even got out of my neighborhood, just hundreds of trees broken into pieces.
That's the most significant thing, right? It wasn't even that cold, and it wasn't even that wet, yet it killed all the trees in Texas.
All the trees are falling apart, and you also got to remember the power outages. We have been slammed with power outages. In fact, Crispy's been without power. That's another one of the reasons he's not here tonight. And Nolan is busy doing something else tonight, so he couldn't be here.
Because the trees are falling on the power lines.
Yeah, the trees are falling on people's homes. Dude, my mother-in-law's house just fucking. It looks like a tornado swept through her house, and just all of her huge oak trees just are now shattered into 100 pieces and laying all over her house and her backyard.
What I'm talking about.
It's ridiculous.
Like Baba Shah in chat saying it's the infrastructure, but it's not the infrastructure. It's just trees. It's just nature. Our trees didn't grow for that type of weather, and now they're just falling all over the place and destroying everything. There's nothing we can do that. We can't make the trees be better at winter.
Yeah, but we could actually move the power lines underground where they're not threatened by trees that are above ground.
Well, you're getting ahead of yourself because no one's ever going to do that.
Yeah, all the other days it's hot as fuck, so I don't know about.
Last time this happened infamously, obviously, was 2021, and that was very much an infrastructure thing. The whole power grid was like minutes away
much more significant.
From catastrophic failure. That's not what happened here. We just it was a perfect combination of just a steady sheets of rain coating all of the trees, everything frozen. Like my tree in my backyard was just a giant popsicle. It was slowly dipping from the weight of the ice until it just snapped in fucking half. And it's been that way all over Central Texas, and that caused all kinds of power outages. And so that's why we're recording this podcast on a Friday night instead of a Thursday night, and that's why Crispy's not here. So yeah, I just wanted to give you all a little peek into what's going on in our little corner of the world. Um, Gigi in chat says my grandma is in Austin, had a tree fall in her house. Yeah, that's pretty.
Yeah.
That's
we need
pretty
to
much.
plant like pine trees or something. Some of them good northern trees.
Yeah, we need to start making Texas.
It's
winter-proof.
it's the soil around here. The soil where Austin is located, it's just not conducive to trees like pine.
Yeah. But you know, it also has to do with you know, it was just a perfect combination of things that caused some pretty horrible effects around here. So that's what we're dealing with. But we are here, of course. This is not a weather podcast. We're not here to talk about the weather. We're here to talk about video games.
We can make it about the weather.
So we're not going to do that. I just want to say before, as per tradition in 2023, I'll start this podcast off right. Have there been any? Has there been any changes in our fantasy league since the last podcast we recorded? I know Chris Davis bid on Shadow Gambit. I don't remember the subtitle.
Shadow Gambit, the Cursed Crew.
The Cursed Crew.
Is this one you think is going to ship this year?
Yes, the trailer says 2023, and if you think about Mimimi's timeline, this is right.
Didn't we talk about this last week? I feel like we talked about this last week.
We mentioned. I think we may have mentioned it. But yeah, I do think they are a studio that tends to announce their games close to release. So I think it's a pretty safe bet release-wise. I noticed my Forspoken review went down another point, so I think I'm at -2 now. But
yeah, it's not too much.
I
picked up Forspoken. I picked up Forspoken today. So
we can talk about it next week.
Why? But aren't all these other games coming out?
Yeah,
I feel like the world moved on from Forspoken.
Yeah, it did. It did a little bit, and who knows what's going to happen. But I finished Dead Space today. We're going to talk about Dead Space tonight. Obviously, if you're watching us live, you can see it on the background there. We're going to talk about it. But you know, I don't know. I was in the mood to buy a game, and I was like, I don't want to be that guy who just like watches the reviews come in and is like, I'm not going to give it a fair shake. So here I am. I did, like I talked about briefly last week, I did get rid of my Xbox. I am now an Xbox-less. I do not have an Xbox anymore. So
we talked about that last week as well. Literally, no one cares what you've done with your old Xbox.
I keep forgetting how old that Xbox was, but yeah.
And also, just to clarify for
Xbox,
people
that's saying like you got rid of some old underwear. No, you're fine.
I got that Xbox with Sunset Overdrive. If that paints a picture. Yeah,
it's an Xbox One. So I mean, we're on a entirely different generation now.
How much did you get for it?
I got $70.
Wow, that's a lot more than I thought.
I basically got Forspoken for it.
Wow, doesn't. Now it's back to seeming like a bad deal.
I could play about 10 hours of Forspoken, and I will have played more Forspoken than I have played with my Xbox in the past like 4 years. So that it seems like a fair trade.
So my question for you, real quick about that, is that did you keep your 360?
Oh yeah. I have. I mean, I don't know why. I don't know when I'm gonna bust out my 360, but I still have my PS3. I still have my 360. They're just packed away.
Okay,
for a rainy day.
Because I figured you probably had a bunch of games from that generation.
Oh yeah. I totally do, but I managed to accumulate a total of like 6 games for my Xbox One. So you know what? It did hurt me a little bit. I traded in all the games I had because like what's the point of having the games if I don't have the console? And I traded in Rare Replay Collection. That one kind of hurt.
Yeah, you shouldn't have done that.
Traded that, and you should have kept that.
Yeah.
For what? Like, what am I going to play it on? I have nothing.
What if you got an Xbox Series X at some point? You know, it plays on that.
I don't. As long as I have a gaming PC, I just don't see that happening. But you're right. Maybe I'll regret it eventually in the future. So we'll see what happens. Anyways, let's get down to it tonight. We don't have a ton to talk about. We want to talk about the Dead Space remake. We want to check in with Brad about Fire Emblem Engage now that he's played a bunch more. And then I think we're going to talk about. We have a little topic of the week this week. We're going to talk a little bit about the recent culling of games as a service games, and there's also just a bunch of general like industry shakeups, a lot of layoffs and weird things happening at Bungie, or not Bungie, I just said Bungie, 343. So there's stuff going on. So we'll talk about that. But my question for you guys is where do y'all want to start tonight? Do you want to start with Dead Space? Since it's the new thing?
I mean, I'm pretty sure we're not going to start with Fire Emblem.
Yeah. Fuck it. Let's start with Dead Space. I just finished this
hold
like
on.
2
Before we
hours
start,
ago.
let me ask you, how much more Forspoken did y'all play?
Well, I just got it today.
How much Forspoken did you play, Chris Davis?
I have played I haven't had time for Forspoken. I've been playing Hi-Fi Rush and I've been playing Dead Space.
He played Dead Space like 3 times, actually.
Nearly 4, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Chris Davis. You knock games out, and you finish games before you move on to new ones. So my question for you is, what the fuck happened to Forspoken, homie?
Because Forspoken came out 3 days before another game that I wanted to prioritize, and then like 2 days after Forspoken came out, another game came out that was like went to the top of my list too. So like I wanted to play those first.
Don't take the bait, Chris Davis, because he's gonna paint it as if you suddenly.
I just want to say we were trying to talk about Forspoken last week, and Nick was like, no, let's wait till next week, and then I'll have played a bunch, and we can go deep. And neither Nick started nor did Chris Davis play anymore. I feel like
I must confess, because like I said, I picked up Dead Space on day 1, and I beat it tonight about an hour and a half before we went live, and I haven't touched anything else game wise. I haven't touched any more Hi-Fi Rush. I mentioned this in Discord. I have been binging a show and I can't stop.
You've been binging a show. Oh, and you won't tell us what the show is, right?
I will not tell anybody what it is until it's over.
I was even talking to my wife about this. Like, what is this fucking show? What could this be? It's got to be something. There has to be like a slight, like, tinge of embarrassment or something. Like, what is this?
I mean, no? I don't think so. I mean, it's not like
Okay, can I ask you how many seasons it is, or maybe what decade it came out in?
8 seasons.
8 seasons. Okay.
And I'm on season 7.
So he's doing Dexter again, is what it is.
Is it more than 5 years old?
Yes.
I mean, it ended more than 8 seasons.
It ended in the 2010s. I'll just give you that.
In the 2010s. Okay.
Yeah. No, sorry. I'm not telling anybody. Let me just, for people listening at home, I'm not telling anybody what it is, because I realized this a long time ago, because the internet will not let anybody just enjoy something, right? So I feel like if I came out and said, hey, I'm watching this thing and I'm really enjoying it, people are just going to come out of the woodwork to be like,
it's controversial. You're saying this show's controversial. I know that there's a romance. There's a romantic tension at the core of it, right?
Yeah, but yeah, and that is like 100% like that is the reason I am in. I am in it for the shipping. Like, that's what I'm in it for, and I'm loving it. But yeah, just people will trip over themselves to tell you that the thing that you like sucks. So I figured I would just rather see the whole thing.
It's a show that some people think sucks.
No, dude. I mean, sure, yeah. I mean, there's a show that you could say that about any show.
What I'm saying is, you wouldn't be watching The Wire and be like, "Oh, I don't want to tell people I'm watching The Wire," because then they're going to say, "Hey, The Wire's for nerds."
I mean, it's like, first of all, there's people in chat that are kind of trying to guess. I'm not rewatching it. I'm watching this for the first time ever, and I am like super invested in it. I have no idea what's going to happen, and I don't want people who have seen the whole show to be like, "Hey, by the way, the last season sucks. You're gonna, and just like completely fuck with me." So I'm just trying to.
Seems like a good guess.
Burn Notice is not a bad guess.
It's a good show.
I feel like people.
It's a long. It's kind of. I would say it's on the same level, just in terms of like the kind of show and like what to expect. And like the production value, yeah, it's kind of on the same level.
So it's probably another USA show. What else was coming out during that era?
Okay, first of all,
I was thinking of some shit like The New Girl or something.
Well, I mean, I have not watched all The New Girl, but I do like that show. It's pretty good. You also got to remember it. You got to remember, like, I don't really watch. This is like the closest I think I've come to like binge watching a comedy, because there are a lot of comedic elements, but it's also not a comedy. but it's
Okay.
not like it's not just straight comedy. It has those elements of things that I things I look for in shows.
Monk is a good
Modern
guess.
Family. It's not
Modern
Monk's too.
Family.
Monk's older.
Why
Monk's
would you
older.
guess Modern Family? First of all, I love how Chris Davis has subtly tried to start playing the Dead Space footage like 4 times. He
Yes,
just
I
keeps
have.
nothing.
Scrubs. Could it be
It's-
Scrubs? I
Scrubs
feel like
went 9
Scrubs is
seasons.
controversial.
First of all,
I feel like Scrubs is controversial.
I just said I don't really watch comedies, and you're
Wait,
guessing
wait.
Modern Family and Scrubs.
Oh wait, no, I thought you were suggesting this was a comedy. Okay.
No, I said
It's
this is
also-
probably
it's-
it's the closest thing I think I've ever come to like binge watching a comedy, but it is not just a comedy. It has other elements that I commonly look for in shows.
I think you also hinted that it's a show that kind of doesn't end well, and maybe that's where the controversy.
No, I think it's a show that is well. I can't talk about it kind of without giving it away, and it ended. The show ended for a very specific reason, and I know what that reason is. You know, I can't. We can't do this. We can't do this. I'm not giving this away tonight. Don't worry. By this time next week, I'll be over. I'll be finished with it, and then I can talk about it. Look, like I don't watch a lot of, as my wife calls it, low commitment television, right? Shows that you can just kind of like. This is like the closest I think I've ever come to watching low commitment television. I needed a palate cleanser after watching a bunch of just really serious dark shit. So
you did say you were watching House at some point.
I was watching House, and I have not finished House yet, but this is not House that I'm talking about.
Okay, we'll figure this out.
Yeah, well, there's a mystery.
Let's get on with the show.
Yeah,
let's get on with the show.
Can we actually talk about Dead Space now?
We can talk about Dead Space. Let's go.
Thank
you know,
God.
we were doing a podcast when the original Dead Space came out. We could just replay that conversation.
No, we can't. No, we can't.
We could actually. Dead Space 2008 was my game, or is it 2009? Was my game of the year, whatever year that was. I think it was 2008.
2008.
3
years after Resident Evil 4.
So here we
2008, that was what, 15 years ago we were podcasting?
Yeah. God.
Oh, wow.
You gotta stop saying that, because it's just gonna make me feel old every time you say it.
I do kind of want to listen to that podcast. Someone find a link to our Dead Space podcast from 15 years ago.
Oh man.
I wonder what we said about it.
So here we are. I don't know where we want to start with this, but obviously there's a couple places that we could go right off the bat. First of all, all three of us have played it.
I know a good place to start. What is y'all's history with the series? Out of curiosity. Is this some shit y'all play all the time? I know Chris Davis is like that.
And I have we've both played all three of the original games.
But like how often? How recently?
I mean, the last Dead Space game I played was 3, and that was when it came out.
So you played that, and you haven't played any of the Dead Spaces since?
That's Brad.
I replayed Dead Space 2 at some point in that gap. So I've played Dead Space 2 I think twice. I played Dead Space. I don't replay a lot. I don't replay a lot of games in general.
Sure, yeah, me too.
I've only played Dead Space 1 once. I played Dead Space 2 twice. I've played Dead Space 3 once. I did start playing Dead Space 3 co-op with my wife at one point, and then something, because she loved Dead Space is like one of her favorite games. In fact,
so you've seen a lot of Dead Space. You've seen her play a lot of Dead Space.
Yes, and she's played Dead Space 1 probably like 10 times, and she's already like halfway. She's already getting ready to start, because she finished this game today too, so she's about to jump into New Game Plus. In fact, she was offended that as soon as I finished this, because she watched me do the final boss, I like took the disc out and like packaged it away, and I was like, time to install Forspoken, and she was like, I'm kind of hurt that it didn't get any additional time in your console.
So I've also only played Dead Space 1 once when it came out.
Okay. Well, to answer your question,
I've never even finished Dead Space 2, and I've never played Dead Space 3.
Well, here's an interesting question: why didn't you finish Dead Space 2? Because I think arguably, I would honestly say
enjoying it. I played probably more than half of that game, and I didn't think it was bad. But I like Dead Space. Or I guess I should also ask you y'all's opinions on Dead Space. I know y'all both really like it. My opinion on Dead Space has always been like, it was fine. I enjoy both of those games. I feel like, I guess it'll be kind of how I talk about this one is I'm enjoying it, and I enjoyed those past games, but I felt especially that first Dead Space was a little one note for me back then. Like it was, 10 hours of shoot necromorphs in the dark in a spaceship. and it was pretty like it was good, but there wasn't really even outside of asteroid sequences, not even really highs and lows. It was just like a good,
Steady.
you
It
know,
was it was an even
steady 8
experience.
for me all the way across. You know what I mean?
The things I will say is back in 2008, and I gave it my game of the year that year, but arguably honestly, I can't remember much else of what came out that year. I don't remember what my list was. But the things that stuck out to me about Dead Space and why I gave it my game of the year that year was because one, it was a new IP, and I love survival horror. I love horror games in general, and it was new. It was exciting, and it was a horror game set in space, which I feel like up until Dead Space there hadn't been a lot of really good ones. My brain keeps flashing back to when I first bought a PS2 and I wanted to play Extermination, or was it Extermination? Was that what that was called? Do you remember that game?
Extermination. Yeah,
Extermination, yeah,
The 2001 PS2 game that was a thing knockoff.
Yeah, that
you
one.
know,
I
when
have a
this
copy
game
of
was
it.
in development, it was like I don't know if the project started out as some sort of like successor to like System Shock or if that was what the rumors was, but I feel like for a long time the rumors were that EA was working on a game that's either a System Shock game or a spiritual successor to System Shock, and I thought that that's what Dead Space, and then it launched out and it was mostly just like a Resident Evil 4 type game, which was
Right.
good. I mean, I like those types of games and it's why I enjoyed I think Dead Space back then, but
I
um
wouldn't be surprised at all if like the trajectory of
yeah.
of the original Dead Space shifted because of Resident Evil 4 to some extent, because they were kind of developed not
Yeah, and BioShock as
along.
well. I think a simplification of like System Shock 2 is like an RPG kind of, it's like a Deus Ex, type game, right? And this was, and Bioshock was sort of a simplification of that formula, and that was more of a direct spiritual successor.
Yeah.
And this is sort of even more of a simplification and kind of just a survival horror game. But I always think of System Shock because the writing on the walls and stuff, which is in 2023, honestly, in this remake, feels a little corny. It feels a little weird.
So
It's
those are the
just
things that this can also be said of some of the just kind of the general like way they tell the story in this game feels a little dated, because those are maybe the things that they could have found ways to improve, because this is a very faithful remake, and I know we're gonna to some extent we're gonna have this conversation tonight about like comparing this remake to the Resident Evil 2 remake.
which is silly, but I guess the fact that people think that they're on the same level is why I want to talk about it.
But
But
here's the thing, because in an effort to kind of move forward talking about this as a remake of the original Dead Space, like if it's hard to have a conversation about a remake these days without comparing it to the Resident Evil remakes, because they've done so many of them so well. But the reason, there's actually a lot of changes to this game, and there's actually a lot
yeah,
of quality of life changes and a lot of like really
yes,
smart changes to this.
yes,
But the reason Resident Evil 2 remake I think is still a better remake is just because, one, the jump from in platform from PS1 to PS4 era is obviously a much bigger jump. But two, the locations and like the environments of Resident Evil 2 are so much more iconic. Like you said, Brad, like you said it kind of laughing about the fact that it all just looks like a spaceship to you, and you're right.
yeah,
But I do think it's a very good looking spaceship. But
yeah.
you're
Of
right.
course,
It is a
to me
spaceship.
it
It
feels
is
one note that which and again more so this one than the second one, obviously, which I feel like has environments that feel pretty different. This one
right.
feels a little one note, and Resident Evil just has a lot more variety. But the reason I don't think they're the same is that Resident Evil 2 remake doesn't have Resident Evil 2, as its bones, right? Like those games aren't like even remotely similar, even in the way that they play. While this game has the original Dead Space as its bone structure, I mean, I'm saying this game is good because Dead Space is good, right?
Yes.
There's no one that hates Dead Space that's gonna like this, and vice versa, right? Like
Well,
this is
but
a much more improved game, and they did a lot of smart stuff, and I know all about all those things about the AI combat encounters and the backtracking and the key cards and how everything's connected now. But it's still Dead Space at its core, and
But
again,
just to
I
just
don't
to
even know if
clarify
it's
what you're saying here, this isn't just a full-on remake of Dead Space 1. It also incorporates a lot of mechanics from 2 and 3, which made those games better in
Right.
in
No,
many
no.
aspects.
I mean, I
One
can
of the smartest things they did with this remake is they took a look at what worked in the sequels, and they decided, well, of course we can roll those back into and make the first game, the original game, a better game because of it. And I think that's very smart. And but one of the questions that Brad kind of asked before we were recording, and I think it's a fair question, is in terms of like, is this closer to the Resident Evil 2 remake, or is it closer to like The Last of Us Part 1? You know what I mean? But it's I feel like it is literally right there in the middle, because yes, this is the jump in technology is quite significant, but not so much that, like, how do I say this? The jump in tech is
there's nostalgia goggles, right? Like we don't really remember what Dead Space 1 looks like unless you like pop it in and
right.
really see what it looks like. But to some extent, this is a little bit like kind of how we remember Dead Space looking in our minds, right? No one's
No, no,
gonna
no,
like,
that's right.
especially if you're coming from like the PC version of Dead Space, which still looks like pretty good by today's standards, right? But because I popped in Dead Space 2 on PC actually fairly recently, and it's still a good looking game. But like, no one's gonna have that sort of confusion with like Resident Evil 2. They're not even the same fucking games. They don't even play the same way, right? It's like
Right.
night and day. Here, obviously, it's much more improved looking game, right? But do you see what I'm saying? Like, your memory is different than actuality, and that's why when you pop in the original Dead Space, you're like, oh, this is way uglier than I remember. Um, but
That
your
is like
brain remembers it looking better. Your brain
that
remembers it
is
looking better. So when I start this up, it's like it's a nice looking game, but to me, it's like, oh, well, this is what Dead Space, kind of looks like. It's just more detailed, right?
more
And
detail with
we
better
even did that.
lighting
We
and
even
stuff.
did that
Yeah.
with The Last of Us a little bit, right? Which
Well,
was a PS3 game.
The Last of Us, that gap is super thin. Like, I mean,
It's
it's
thin because we had like a really nice HD remaster last gen, but I'm saying like turning on the actual like PS3 game of The Last of Us is a pretty big difference from that and the remake that came out last year.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Like the
Um,
standard def. I mean,
yeah,
it's not wasn't standard def, but it was fucking 720p Last of Us or whatever.
uh,
That came out on the PS3.
yeah. Hey, real quick, is Twitch having issues for
I have
anybody
no
else?
idea.
I don't think
Because
so.
I can't. Okay, it must just be me. I
No,
can't see
I'm
the
watching
things.
the stream. It seems fine.
Okay, cool. But Brad is absolutely right, because I had to like pull up compare. I was like, this game looks amazing, but it is kind of how I remember Dead Space looking. And I pulled up a bunch of comparison shots, because obviously whenever you get a remake, there's comparison shots everywhere. And I looked at it and I was like, oh my god, okay, you're right. It's definitely a huge jump, but in my mind, before I looked at those comparison shots, I was just like, isn't this just how Dead Space looks? It's a weird phenomenon. Um,
I mean,
but
that's not how I see it. Like, you can make that argument all day, but for me, like, I remember so many sections from that original game that I
well,
may
you
have.
also have much better memory than I do, just
You
admittedly.
said you played this game once when it came out, 15
I
years ago.
no, I. That's not what I said. You didn't let me get ahead say what I was gonna say, so I got cut off. I played Dead Space 1. The last time I played it probably was like 2014, 2015, probably. No, I would have played it around 2016 because that's when they added the 360 backwards compatibility, and I wanted to check out and see the uptick in quality.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
I did play it, but like I remember things like, and all these are quality of life improvements that got fixed in the level design of the remake, like how so much of the game with the kinesis module wasn't about just grabbing objects in the original game. It was about moving just
Yeah,
items in the environment for the sake of being able to do that. In this, it's now like in the sequel, a weapon
it's
that's
Dead
very
Space 2.
useful.
Yeah.
It's but also like the level design, man. The cargo space of Dead Space 1, where you find the marker finally, and you have to get it onto the shuttle to get down to Aegis 7. I'm not saying spoilers that have already been known for 15 years.
Statute of
That
limitations has
sequence
expired on
is
that.
you dragging in combat encounters over and over again, dragging the marker across conveyor belts to move it around. You don't do that in this. The medical deck, when you first go to it, it has the image diagnostics chain center where it has the necromorph body in the chamber there being scanned constantly, and that was your platform that you had to constantly move around in order to traverse that environment. You don't have to do that. You move it once, and you never have to do it again. Like it's things like that.
I just want to be very clear. The conversation we were having a minute ago is different from what you're describing, because what you're describing is absolutely right. There are a ton of changes to the actual design within the environments that already existed that make this a much better game. But from strictly speaking, visually, if you want to compare remakes and whether this is more of a what's the word I'm looking for? Because you think about like The Last of Us Part 1, which is just literally a kind of a visual upgrade, and then you think about Resident Evil 2, which is a complete overhaul, and this is somehow and Resident Evil 2, like Brad said, is not the same game. It's not a one-to-one like that. They recreated that whole game from the ground up.
It's a completely original game, really, and all but story and setting, right? I mean,
the bones of this game, like Brad said, is like this is the same environment, like, but with tons of quality of life changes and taking advantage of technology to improve certain sequences. There's a lot of that stuff layered on top of it. But what we were talking about a minute ago,
in terms of like memory and like stuff like the combat, for example, maybe there's improvements to the way it plays and controls, and maybe like you're saying, there's some stuff from Dead Space 2. I don't necessarily remember that. I mean, I remember like, yeah, you're right, the kinesis stuff, doing more of that in 2, right? Like throwing like body parts and like spikes.
I mean, when you play Dead Space 2, the first hour of Dead Space 2 is you don't have a plasma cutter for the first half hour.
Yeah.
It instead you're tied up and you have to actually use kinesis to actually kill necromorphs.
I'm saying, differences aside, this game feels like the Dead Space that I remember playing, which is a good thing because it's fun shooting shit in Dead Space. But it's
faithful. It's faithful with a lot of really smart improvements. And
I think
one of the oh, go ahead.
I think you can make that argument for the core gameplay. I don't think you can make that argument for a bunch of the improvements. Like again, this game adds a whole side mission system and side quests that you go on that expand the narrative and give you more access to more stuff that was never in the first game.
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff, and this is, you're right. There's kind of two sides of this. One is just kind of like a lot of the quality of life improvements and design and taking advantage of technology in a certain way to kind of make the flow of the game much better. And then there's things that they've done that is completely original, like the side missions, which didn't exist at all in that original game, which are there to kind of like it's weird because I'm not entirely sure where EA Motive is going with this in terms of like, is their next logical step, if this is successful, which it most certainly I think is at this point, is their next step to like make Dead Space 2, or is this to make something completely original, going like relaunch the franchise in a totally different direction? I don't know, but they took things from like Dead Space 2 and 3 like lore wise and story wise, things that were hinted at in those games that you never really got, that were never touched on in the original Dead Space, and they found ways to kind of like, if you do the side missions, they're like Easter eggs that kind of like feed back into the lore, into like the overarching universe, in ways that you didn't really get until you got further into the series.
Because people don't remember. Cool. People really don't remember that Dead Space, when it first came out, was a big transmedia project for EA. Something that I don't think they've really done as well since then, because they came out with animated films. It had a spin-off light gun game for the Wii.
That stuff started with Dead Space 2. Like that wasn't when Dead Space 1.
No, that was Dead Space 1.
Extraction was before 2.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I mean, you're saying like transmedia. I mean, that's just all video games these days, pretty much.
Not to this degree. Not to this degree.
Yeah, EA went a little harder on it than I think most most publishers would. They were really banking, which is when you think about it in retrospect, it's kind of like it's crazy that they let this series kind of die on the vine because they went all in on Dead Space pretty early on.
Because fucking people disliked 3 because of they EA'd it up with microtransactions and
Yeah.
shit. It's their fucking
Right.
fault.
When half of Dead Space 3 is a really, really good experience. It just has these quality of life, no, not even quality of life, quality of monetization aspects to it that just poisons the experience.
Yeah.
Can I
No.
ask you something?
Sure.
Do y'all like all the zero G stuff in this one?
By comparison to the
Yes.
original experience, is night and day better.
But the original game didn't have a ton of it, right? I mean, there were like specific sequences, and I feel like they were almost more like puzzle-like, right? Where you were
They
jumping
didn't.
to different.
Yeah, they didn't have a ton of it in the first game. They really started to experiment with it in 2, and they've totally kind of that's one of the areas where they've folded Dead Space 2 back into this in a really smart way.
Well,
Because that zero G stuff is definitely a highlight of the series
How much
overall.
of it of this was there in 2?
There was quite a bit in 2.
No, you're
Uh,
three was the
hey,
one that the first cabinet dissect
wait, Gustavus,
space.
your audio is like really breaking up here. Sorry.
Garbled. I think it's your internet.
Frames. How do I send out?
Still kind of
You
still
could
a little garbled.
maybe drop out of the call and rejoin. Maybe that would help. I don't know. Oh, unless that screws things up.
Let's see, hang on.
Well, while he's doing that,
I think what he was saying is that there was a lot more of that in Dead Space 3 because I don't of it, and I don't really recall doing too much of this free flight stuff. I know it was in there.
Oh yeah, can you hear me now?
yeah, you sound better.
Okay. The first half of Dead Space 3 is you being in orbit around that destroyed fleet, and it's about you jumping and traveling between ships to investigate and go on side missions and stuff. Like that was the best part of Dead Space 3.
And
cool.
like sequences in Dead Space in the original Dead Space 1 that were little more than like there's a part later in the game where you had to jump from the Ishimura to another ship, right? In the original, I'm pretty sure you just did like you were kind of like stuck to the wall of the Ishimura, and then you kind of like pushed yourself off and you had to kind of like float to the other ship, and that was kind of it.
Yeah.
And in this game now, it's like you walk out and then you can tap the buttons to like completely lift into zero gravity, and you can free float, and you have the jets on your boots and stuff. And like that didn't become a thing until Dead Space 2, but that was one of the things that made Dead Space 2, the OG Dead Space 2, in my opinion, a much better experience. Like I used to think Dead Space 2 is probably the quintessential Dead Space game because it did
I think a
so
lot
much
of
of what
people feel that way.
it
I
did so much of
do
what
think
Dead
there were
Space 1
some like
did.
Dead Space 1 people who like maybe preferred the more simple, more atmospheric experience in terms
Dead Space
of
2 is more of an action game, I think.
yeah.
It is. Yeah.
And this remake, I think is a really strong argument to be made that this remake is now kind of the purest, best playing Dead Space game
Distillation.
out
You think
there.
so? Or do you think
Yeah,
2 plays better than this?
I mean,
I mean,
I
2
think
has more interesting like enemy designs and stuff. Right?
I think the argument at this point is going to come down
more
to between
variety of environments and stuff.
I think the argument's going to come down to a comparison between Dead Space 2 and this remake, because Dead Space, this is now like mechanically and design wise, I think maybe the best game in the series, but Dead Space 2 is still the kind of the more action heavy. It's kind of like comparing Resident Evil 4 to like Resident Evil 2 remake or something. You know what I mean?
You
Like
think so? You think 2 is that big of a leap?
It's pretty. It's a lot. There's a lot more. It's throwing a lot more enemies at you, and you're giving a lot more. It's just you're kind of always in, not always, but like you're in like there's long stretches of Dead Space 1 in this remake and the original where you're going from room to room and you're not finding any enemies at all. And I don't think that
Honestly, it
happens
feels
nearly
more
as
of like
much.
the leap between like Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2, honestly, to me. Where 2
That might
really
be.
kind of amped it up with like the enemies and the weapons and stuff. And
but I do think
Mm,
with Dead Space 2 they went about it in such a way that it kind of took some of like the tension, not tension, the what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, it's just like the fear of, because like I feel like this is a much more, I don't know how to describe it. I just think Dead Space 2 took it a little too far, as far in leaning in the action orient, and that was because
mm,
Dead Space 2 was post Resident Evil 4, right? Actually,
Well, they both were post
yeah,
Resident Evil 4.
I don't
hmm,
know. I mean, again, y'all
hmm.
played more of it than I did, obviously, but
Right.
I don't know. Um, hmm, I don't know.
I think
Like,
I think at the end of the
y'all
day,
find
though,
this
this
game
is
scary? I don't think this is a very
uh
scary game.
well, that's a hard question to answer, because I do feel like I've become, at this point, over the years, especially because of this fucking website, I have really become desensitized to a lot of this
Yeah.
stuff. Um,
Like,
if I had played this game back in 2008, like this remake, hell yeah, it would have scared the shit out of me.
yeah.
Um,
Horror games
but
really don't work for me that much, but also remember this is a remake of a game that, came out 15 years ago. I remember all the gameplay beats and what the experience is. Like, the series hasn't scared me since 2010 when Dead Space 2 had its very few jump scares to it.
let me tell you, one of the coolest moments in any horror game, or at least kind of like this style horror game, right? Not psychological horror, but like action horror, right? Is, if we'll call it, was playing Dead Space 2 for the first time, and you walk into this, like, I forget, this room, and there's like all these containers everywhere, and then like without any kind of like hint or note, like thing to kind of cue you into what's about to happen, you just see this little creature like poke its head around
Yeah.
one of the things, and you're just like, what the fuck? And it's like watching you, and then it's like watching that the Dilophosaurus in Jurassic Park, where he kind of pokes his
Yeah.
head around the tree, and then all of a sudden
Those guys
it
are
comes,
like that shit's
dude,
I mean, Dead Space 2 seems I mean, yeah,
so good.
yeah.
That shit was so good. Which is why I like
Maybe they should remake 2.
when they did that shit in The Last of Us Part 2. With the stalkers, where there's a sequence where you go in there and they're like poking their heads around things, and
Yeah.
like they're, like
Really?
I was like, oh my god, this is like Dead Space 2. Like I've always loved that moment.
Oh, I
And
do remember that in
Yeah.
Last of Us 2, yeah.
and and it's like, now I'm sitting here thinking a lot about like it seems to me like Dead Space is kind of, at least it looks like, unless EA is like, this didn't sell 15 million units, therefore it's a failure. This seems to me like it's a surefire success at this point. Everybody was kind of raging
Yeah,
about it, and everybody's excited that Dead Space is back. So it seems obvious to me that EA is going to do something with Dead Space, and it's kind of like,
maybe.
well, what do I want them to do next? Because like, it seems like EA Motive has maybe found their kind of like, maybe their cash cow right now. Like now we've kind of become the official Dead Space studio, if it was
I
going
don't
to
know about
continue.
cash cow. Like, it's
Well,
still, like, not a big moneymaker, right? We're gonna talk about
they're flag, like, but they have made it their own, I think.
This is their baby now because they were a support studio for the longest time in helping out with other games. This is their first real hands-off.
I
We own this experience.
but this is less of an original work than their last game. Like, they owe way more to Visceral for this project than that the completely original
True.
game they made,
But then
that Star Wars game they made.
we're delving
But
into semantics. Like, is it easier to remake a game and do it better, or
Yes.
is it easier to just make a new experience that you control entirely?
No,
real
it's
quick,
much easier to do a remake
I
because
don't.
okay,
they owe so much to the original game. The art design, like the entire premise, the combat, everything that is great about this game, outside of those new things like the new AI, director, that stuff's
You're
cool. But like this, they owe almost everything to that original game.
that every remake is like that, but also this
No,
game, the original Dead Space was made on Tiger Woods PGA Tour. Okay, use that engine. This is a whole other kettle of fish, man. This is brand new Frostbite. This is them learning from everything that made the series great throughout it, not just from the first game.
okay, I see where both of y'all are coming from,
you're right.
but one, I do think Brad is absolutely correct, because the
Maybe it's more
bones
like
of
the
this
Demon Souls remake. It still feels a little blue pointy.
Yeah, it does feel a little blue pointy, but two, to Chris Davis's point, they did incorporate, and this is kind of one of those things you kind of have to play the whole game to kind of really and do the new side stuff to kind of like see this. They demonstrated, I think, with that side stuff that like they can create new content within this universe in a smart way. Like the side stuff that they introduced, while there's not a ton of it, is really well done.
Like
And there is not a point where I felt like, okay, now I'm watching. I'm going from like this is visceral content, and now I'm seeing EA motive content. It's a very smooth transition. Like you can't really. It's seamless, and it feels like It feels like it was always meant to be there.
Like we're talking about just pure gameplay at this point. We really haven't talked about the narrative. And sure, we all know what the narrative beats are from this game that we played 15 years ago, but motive. I want to talk about the narrative because they have done such an excellent job, in my opinion, of updating the narrative and making just this fairly incoherent original narrative experience into something that not only makes sense, but it transcends it. The stuff they do with Isaac and Nicole's storyline and a bunch of the background characters that really just were kind of one note and really didn't do anything beyond just bark orders at Isaac for things to do. Like, you feel for everyone you see on screen now. And you get...
Except that first guy. He didn't do much before he got murked.
Are we talking about Chen?
He's talking about Chen, but like... Yeah. Chen is part of Hammond's narrative. He has a whole arc going on, man. Like, the things they do with fleshing out the relationship between Nicole and Isaac, especially in the later chapters of the game, when you realize exactly what was going on with their relationship, it's mind-boggling how much better it is, man.
I mean, that's cool.
I don't know if I would go as far as to say it's mind-boggling, but it certainly doesn't feel it doesn't feel like a step backwards, and it doesn't feel out of place. Like, it doesn't feel like, okay, now I'm seeing the stuff that was developed by a different team. Like, it feels like it fits comfortably with the foundation that Visceral laid for them. And from a technical standpoint, they have proven themselves from a technical standpoint that they have the chops to make a great Dead Space game. They have established their foundation, right? And they have proven.
I mean, we still have no idea if they actually could make a really great Dead Space game. I mean, we know Visceral has made at least 2, but we don't know that. Is there enough original ideas here that proves that they could make, a great Dead Space,
absolutely,
world and enemy design and whatever,
I'm not as like quick to jump to the answer is yes as Chris Davis is, but I am like torn right here because like I think about Dead Space 2, which has always been my favorite Dead Space game, and I'm like, do I want them? I would guess like it'd be really cool to see them take this same approach to Dead Space 2, but then I'm like, but they've also proven that they can do original stuff, and like we haven't had an original Dead Space game in years. And at this point, I feel like the smarter thing to do would be to now branch off. They have this now as, again, the starting point for the franchise, and to just branch off and start a new timeline and do their own Dead Space 2. You know what I mean?
Especially because, don't make it Dead Space 2. Make it Dead Space 0 or something, whatever. Just do something completely original. I mean, a lot of their best ideas, right, are just stuff taken from the second game, which wasn't their ideas either, right? Like the kinesis stuff, the free flight stuff, the alt fire stuff, whatever the fuck. That's just stuff taken from 2.
You know what the smartest thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe Chris Davis, because you've played these more than I have, I think. But I think this was a completely original idea mechanically. But everybody always talks about the turret sequences, right?
And that was probably the low point of the original game, yes.
The turret sequences are so much better in this, and I don't think they did that in Dead Space 2 or 3. Like, in this game, you just you go up to the turret, you do some like sync thing with it, and then you just aim your gun, and the turret is like synced with your gun. So you're just firing, you're pulling the trigger while aiming your gun, and the turret is like turning and firing for you. So you're no longer like locked into the turret, like sitting in the seat doing an actual like turret sequence. You can still maneuver and fly around, and it's just like oh my god, that works so much better. And these sequences, they don't feel like they drag the experience down like that first game did. And
No,
I was just like,
that was a new interpretation. That was brand new.
I think that was like the one, like maybe the one thing that was like a completely new take on something from the original game.
I mean, they've got
that a hunt.
They've got a bunch of little smaller stuff that are
Sure.
improvements, but like whole original things, yeah, that's the one big major new thing I think they've added. As far as we talk with the basic one playthrough experience, when we go to New Game Plus, is a whole other conversation.
Right. Yeah. So there's an alternate ending. I don't know. You've gotten the alternate ending because you have to do New Game Plus, right? So there's the whole thing you do in New Game Plus to get an alternate ending. I don't know what that is. I'm gonna watch Robin when she gets to it. Probably.
Okay. Well, when she gets to it, it is a hidden side quest that you had to do sequentially throughout the game, and you have to do certain things that the game does not tell you anything about.
You can't do it on your first playthrough?
No, it is not in the non-available first playthrough.
Annoying.
Well, here's the thing. I will say that it's an alternate ending. It's not the secret ending. Put it that way, if that makes sense to you.
Is there a secret ending too?
No, there is not a secret ending. There's the base ending, then there's the alternate ending.
Okay.
The alternate.
My only question I have for you, Chris Davis, is this: does this alternate ending feel like, okay, this is an ending that is very far removed from the original, that they could now use to launch their own canon? You know what I mean?
No. Here's what I'll say.
Shit.
Here's what I'll say is that the whole alternate ending thing is based, again, it's on a secret hidden side quest series of events that you have to do throughout the entire game. But it also thematically ties into what you're doing during that side quest.
I actually know what it is because I looked it up. I just haven't seen the actual ending. And I'm probably going to do the New Game Plus at some point, or at least Robin's going to. So I'm just going to piggyback off of her.
Yeah,
we should move on.
But quick, I want to mention that this is a really good New Game Plus experience because not only does it let you carry over your stuff that you've already unlocked, it also introduces new variants of necromorphs that are tougher and can pop out throughout the entire game, not just like in the latter half.
That's good.
It adds that extra hidden side quest for the alternate ending, and what really excited me is that it adds new elements to make it clear to the player just how Isaac is falling into the hallucination. Yeah, there's hidden narrative stuff that you go over to a spot in a map and sure there's just another terminal, but now that terminal's activated in New Game Plus and it gives you a new perspective on what happened with Isaac in a certain moment of the game.
Okay.
There's a lot of stuff like that. It's extremely
terminals.
Cool. Just like a screen that you go press a button on.
Okay.
That's pretty cool. That kind of makes me want to do the New Game
And we
Plus.
didn't mention it, but it is cool that everything's connected now and not separated by a loading screen. I mean, they are more or less just new hallways and stuff, but you can. I was surprised the first time I was going down a hallway and I'm like, I looked at my line or whatever or my map. I like that there's a map now. I don't know if there was in the original game.
Wasn't.
And I was like, okay, well, it's telling me to go this way. So I'm going to go down this hallway, backtrack, because I think there's a door I can get through with my, the new key card system. And then when I clicked that line, I realized instead of telling me to go back the way I was, it was telling me to keep going down that hallway. And then I realized that the tram was just taking me back to a previous area that I realized once I got back to, because I did backtrack to the tram, I went back down that path and realized, oh, that was the path I was walking down that it was telling me to keep going down. It's nice that everything's connected now, even if everything does still feel, more or less kind of linear. I know they give you reasons to go back, but honestly, it just gives me anxiety. The fucking chests that you can't open and stuff. It's like, you need level 2, you need level 3. And I'm like, I'm never going to remember where this shit is. I hate that. But
the map helps with that shit a lot, and like
I wish I could mark the map or something, or I wish it had the Resident, or I don't think it does, the Resident Evil thing where
it turns
goes
red
from
or
blue to orange or whatever.
Yeah,
that would be so nice.
Yeah,
yeah.
Well, they kind of have that.
Rooms are dimmed if you haven't been in them, but it doesn't do the thing where it's like the room is red if there's an item in there that you haven't. Yeah,
it'd be so nice because these chests that you can't get into, it's just. It's like,
but
if I don't stumble into them again, I'm gonna forget.
But if you do access a locked room that was behind a keycard security clearance thing, that marker does disappear from the map and brightens the room, so you know that you've been there and you've unlocked that stuff at least.
It's like it starts to go down the path that we wanted to, and then stops just short of what we really want. But like that's fine. It's still an improvement, and the fact that the map even exists at all is cool. And the line now to me just serves more of a purpose of like, okay, what's the quickest way to get where I need to go, not necessarily what's the like how like where not just aside from just tell me where I am. And it's also like a way I often use it as a means of like, okay, it's telling me to go left, I'm gonna go right because that's the area that and like that's really nice to be able to do.
You can just go into the control settings and like turn that off and make it pull up the map instead.
That's what I do.
Oh yeah,
just use that to kind of navigate, which is
that's
cool.
pretty nice.
It still shows the line on the map, but you're kind of seeing a more traditional Resident Evil style map. But it was there's too much of a delay when it pops up, and it was like just enough to bother me. So I ended up going back to
so
the line,
as far as the line goes, like I was kind of hoping they would incorporate how they did the line from Dead Space 3, in which you can actually use it to locate different side mission paths and objectives you can go after.
Well, you can do that in this. I don't remember exactly.
No,
how it works in Dead Space
you
3.
got to switch objectives in order to do that. But like with the line in Dead Space 3, you could just press a button while you have the line out to switch between the tasks that you want to go on, and it changes the color line and where it goes.
that would have been nifty.
Like what I really would have liked.
Fucking motive.
Like my one little gripe with the map is that I wish I could just like pick a point on the map and the line would navigate me to that point of the map.
Yeah.
But that's not that's fine.
It's still a little weird, even though they've kind of gone back and added voice to Isaac, because in the original he was silent. It's still a little awkward, and I noticed this in the original Dead Space where he just doesn't react outside of those scripted story sequences where he is talking. He does say a little bit of stuff here and there, but there's still those moments like I could think of I don't remember where it was, like in medical or something where or the morgue, or I don't know where it was, but he sees like a woman that just looks like a human woman, and then she's like dissecting like a necromorph, and then she like cuts her throat. You know how I'm talking?
Yeah.
Remember that sequence?
He reacts to that.
It's like there's no way he wouldn't be like, hey. It's like the first human that he's seen that wasn't a fucking necromorph, and he just stands there like a psychopath and just watches that whole sequence without moving, without saying anything. And it's just
he
like,
says something. He says something.
No, he doesn't.
He must have the volume
say
wrong.
anything. I
Dude,
did that last night.
Dude, I played this game through 4 times now. I'm telling you, he does.
Chris Davis.
I did it last night.
Chris Davis. There is also like I see what Brad's saying, because there's also like a moment very, very like at the very end of the game where kind of like everything is revealed, right? And it's like what should be an earth shatter, like his world is shattered, like he's learning the truth, right? And he says not, like he doesn't react at all to it, and that's
it's like a Gordon Freeman sort of situation sometimes.
And that is kind of an example of where like they could have maybe done a little bit more to kind of like, they already went as far as to like give him a face and a voice in this game. Why not make him a little more emotive? But like regardless, that it seems like that's a little bit nitpicky when overall this is a very, very, very well made remake, and it's exciting to be a Dead Space fan fun. Again. I think,
and it's addictive. Like it's hard to turn off. Like it's well paced and it's addictive to like just kind of like keep going, and you know it's probably why it's so replayable. I mean, it's fun to shoot things. You know what? It has that Resident Evil 4 laser in it, and I like that. I wish it still existed in Resident Evil, and it doesn't. So, fuck it.
All right, let's shift gears.
Okay. Wait. One more complaint I have about Dead Space in general, and maybe it's just that first one. The pacing at which they dole out new weapons is so slow, and I find that really frustrating. You have so many nodes. You have so many nodes before you even get like your second, third weapon, and it's like, I just want the guns I remember, right? Like, how long does it take? I mean, you get the plasma cutter to like the pulse rifle, right? And that's like all you have. I mean, they just space that shit out so far, and I feel like they should give you more upfront.
I could be wrong, but I think
it's more like
that.
So you're playing with more things, I guess, throughout much of that game.
I feel like I had all the weapons by like halfway through the game, and then the second half was just upgrading all that shit.
Yeah, that's the first half is you get all the, I think, like chapters maximum. Um, like the second half of the game is you using your security clearance and going out on side objectives to unlock these locked rooms
Upgrades.
where you get weapon specific upgrades that therefore expand the upgrade tree of your weapons.
It was just FYI, I think your mic's going out again.
Yeah, which your recording's gonna hear you, so that's fine. I
Yeah.
kind of get, I kind of understand what you're getting at, but still, I just want my line gun. When do I get my fucking line gun? I think that's the next one I get.
Soon.
But come on.
Soon. I do think they kind of condensed that a bit.
This
also,
is medical chapter like 4 or 5. Like I'm using the line gun here, so you must be really close.
Yeah.
I do also want to point out, I feel like I was very loyal to specific weapons in the original Dead Space, and certain weapons felt I wasn't interested in using them.
The pulse rifle still feels stupid. I mean, the all fire is better, obviously now,
Dude,
but like it still feels like a waste.
I used every weapon in this game a lot.
The contact meme is awesome now, and the
force
gun is incredible. It is so fucking cool. The fact that when you fire it, it not only knocks the enemy back, it strips the flesh from their bones. Like you see it go flying in the air. It is incredibly violent, but so cool.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. All right, we are moving on from Dead Space. God damn it! I swear to God. Okay.
Let me guess, Nick. You thought it was gonna be a short show?
I didn't say that. The question is, should we take a break or should we? Chris Davis.
Break.
Well, Chris Davis, you said you wanted to just quickly mention some updates about Hi-Fi Rush. Can you do that fairly quickly? You're the only one here who's been playing more of it.
No, Brad's been playing more of it. I finished it the other day. And I wanted to have a conversation with Brad about that because this game is
go
really
ahead.
good.
I mean, I've not played that much more because mostly I've been playing Fire Emblem because it's on a Switch, which is what I have access to easily.
Okay, then we won't take long with this. This will not be nearly as long.
Still pretty cool? Is it pretty cool still?
It is absolutely pretty cool. I will say it is, in my opinion, a Game of the Year contender. The levels the levels just get better and better. The music keeps getting better and better. The writing is just fun from start to finish. Everything you do in this game just brings a smile to your face. It is just so fucking good.
I am pretty sure that if I wasn't binging that TV show, I would have finished this game as well.
You have got to play Hi-Fi Rush. This is
I know.
Everyone on this site needs to play it, and it's probably going to end up on so many Game of the Year lists.
I think we all are going to play it, honestly. Even Nick, who it doesn't really seem like his flavor, but I think he'll still get through it. The thing is, this is more worthy of winning a Game of the Year award than Dead Space Remake.
Let's not go there.
It's an original project.
I will fight you. It's just throughout the game they're constantly giving you new mechanics, new ideas for stuff. There is an interesting new game plus mechanic with post game content that I have yet to explore, but I hear it's actually pretty good. How
long did that first playthrough take you? I've heard someone say like 12 or 13 hours, which
it was probably about 10 to 12, something like that. I don't remember exactly. I can go look it up in a minute, but
approximately Dead Space link.
I don't know if I mentioned it last week. The only thing I wish was different in this game, and I think it probably has more to do with the budget, I guess. But it doesn't even have to be the budget. I wish the levels were shorter. I wish the levels were like half as long and there was just twice as many, if that makes sense. I just wish they chopped it up more so it felt more replayable. But some of these levels, they just feel like they go on and on and on and on, which is fine when you're playing it the first time. But if you're trying to go back to like perfect scores or whatever, it doesn't feel good when the level's so fucking long. I just wish they chopped it up more.
I've still only done that first tutorial level, but that was a pretty long level.
Yeah, I would say the first half of the game does a lot of the long levels, but it starts to break them up towards the second half. Like they will do levels built around specific mechanics and ideas, and focus on those, or even devote levels entirely to just a boss. So,
I was surprised by like when I first started playing this game, when I first saw this game, when I first started playing it, I thought it was going to be like a really simple game that was going to kind of reach its ceiling pretty quickly because of the focus on rhythm versus, other games in the genre that are like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta, which are a lot more complex. And I was surprised that this game kept introducing like new
And
mechanics to make it a to put it up there with other complex action games, like stuff like your parries and your grabs, and
Yeah,
it's a cool game.
the minute they add
and
the parry mechanic, it changes the entire way you approach combat.
and that I feel like that feeling that you're describing, Brad, of like having expectations, that kind of expectation also stems from the fact that like because of the kind of uh release this got, like it was just kind of like a sudden shadow drop. It just gives you
Yeah.
those kind of games tend to kind of give you this feeling of like, okay, well, this wasn't their main, like they weren't focusing all of their attention on this is like their side project, which it still very
Hmm.
well may be that, but somehow it still manages to kind of like, you know exceed that expectation, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm still kind of blown away by what this thing ended up being, and how many people have adopted this already as just like a game of the year contender.
It's
uh
cool, but it's not. I mean, look, some of the platforming is still a little dreadful, to be honest. I mean, I've gotten to some really frustrating sequences because he falls like very quickly, and it's hard to like judge where you're jumping, and sometimes
Do you
it's
ever
just
walk or run
annoying.
faster? Like, do you ever unlock the ability to like move faster? Because I feel like he's
No,
kind of sluggish.
that is your max speed because you're set to the rhythm. Everything in the game is set
That's
to the
true.
rhythm of the music.
That's true. That's true. But yeah, anything else you want to say about it? You finished it. And you think it's great?
I think I don't think it's just great. I think it's excellent. It's
It is
so
pretty great. It's
much
no Beautiful
fun.
Joe, but it's
I
pretty great.
I don't play
I would love to see a Beautiful Joe game in this setting. Or I just sort of wish this was a Beautiful Joe game. Honestly,
Well,
Yeah.
I just
that
want
that
Beautiful Joe
that
to
may
come
be
out.
slightly unfair, but also, does this not kind of seem like maybe this generation's like equivalent of what beautiful, like the next, you know what I mean? Like
No,
maybe this
sort
is
of. I
the
guess.
beautiful Joe of our day.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Sure. This generation's Beautiful Joe. I'll take it. I
That's a
guess.
box quote if I ever heard one. All right, let's take a quick break. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're gonna check up with Brad about Fire Emblem Engage. He's played a bunch more of it, and then we're gonna have a little conversation about the shakeups in the industry we're seeing right now around games as a service and 343 and all that stuff. So if you're listening, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. All right. So, welcome back to the show. Now, can we get back to the conversation we were having during the break? Chris Davis, I want you to answer for us right now, definitively, which game is the better game? Dead Space 1 or Dead Space 3?
Dead
Go.
Space 1 original or Dead Space 3?
Yes.
Yes. Dead Space 1 from 2008 or Dead Space 3?
The answer is a number. You can only
The
say a number. I don't want to hear anything
Dead
more than a
Space
number. It's
1
10 o'clock.
original if I think about the entire experience.
Okay.
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 That's fine. That wasn't
Sounds like a
technically a
lie,
number.
but
That wasn't technically a number. He said 1 or 3 and you said a sentence. But that's fine. That's totally, you got our answer.
One, okay? But like
Okay.
this is an answer that I
wow, so
have to
3
put like
really is
5 different
trash.
asterisks
Okay.
on, okay?
You heard it here first. Dead Space 3 is trash from Chris Davis.
Mechanically, Dead Space 3 is superior. You
It's
cannot
the
deny
worst
that.
Dead Space game. Wow.
No, it's not.
Whoa. Wait. Quiet. Back up. Chris Davis, what did you just say?
I said mechanically, Dead Space 3 is a superior experience. You cannot
Brad.
deny that first half of the game, when you are floating in the fleet and going exploring these derelict ships, which have been there for hundreds of years, wasn't fucking awesome.
And that
That's
was half
pretty-
of a game. That was half.
Yes.
No, that's pretty
What
cool,
was the
I guess.
second half?
The second half was you
Snow.
went down to the planet.
and you're on the snow planet. It
being
was
on
like
being on a snow
suddenly
planet wasn't cool.
it was like suddenly it became like Lost Planet. Remember
That's
that
not cool.
series?
That's not wrong.
You know what? You know
I
what?
mean, at least they mixed up the environment finally.
Yeah, you know what? See that I know we're back on Dead Space already, but like
Damn
if I if EA Motive is given free reign to make an original Dead Space game, I hope they do something crazy and bold like what they try with Dead Space 3 in terms of like changing up the backdrop. Like if they just do Dead Space 4 or like the new timeline like Dead Space 2 or whatever, and it's just like another space station or whatever and it looks very much like Dead Space 1, I'm gonna be a little disappointed. I want to see them do
Yeah.
something crazy, like Dead Space on like a tropical jungle planet or something. I don't fucking know.
Do
But,
Dead Space 4, but be set on Earth with the ending that happened in Dead Space 3.
Yeah,
Like
Dead Space in Manhattan.
Dead Space 3 ended with the necromorph moons finding Earth and consuming the population. Like, set it there. You have so many different environments you can explore with that. Let
Right.
alone you're talking about an Earth in the 27th century.
Dead Space in the Hood. Yeah.
Oh my god!
Well,
Is
if
that
the
like
Lord takes
Leprechaun?
us there,
Is that like the
I'm
Leprechaun?
following.
Is that like
Yeah.
the Leprechaun movie? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's focus. Brad, you've
Yeah.
played a fuck ton more of Fire Emblem Engage.
I have.
Go.
I have played a lot more Fire Emblem Engage. Yeah, Fire Emblem Engage. That's the one we talked about. I feel like we didn't go too deep last week because I really had not played that much, and now
Who's
I've
this
played a lot
girl?
more. And now I can more definitively say. By the way, everything here is me not in a combat scenario. Although I am going to do a little bit of
Although that's
training
fair
here.
because the footage from last week was entirely combat, so it's nice
Yeah,
to
yeah.
see.
And this is just what I was doing.
Oh my
I feel
god!
like
Look at all the ladies.
I
You
He
have
have
a
a
always
whole
gets
team
the
of
ladies
ladies.
rosters, man. That's what he
I
does with
know,
these
but
games.
I mean,
it's
I don't
hard
blame
though.
him.
It's hard. I play on a special difficulty.
Yeah, it's hard.
It,
Brad's
it's
real
not just
hard for it.
hard / classic. It's hard / classic / all lady roster. And let me tell you, especially in this game, you get new recruits as you play through the story. And unlike other Fire Emblem games, like in this one especially, they're all so good. They're just better than the ones that you've got earlier in the game, which is a little bit frustrating because it's like, well, this is just like the same as this other person, but just better in every way, and I should just use this new person. But sometimes that new person's a guy, and I don't play with guys on my team, and it's been tough because there are random dice rolls, and sometimes some characters just get blessed. I mean, they actually have growth percentages and they literally just on paper are better, but it's still dice rolls at the end of the day. And you can occasionally, restart if you get like a really bad level up, especially if it's at the Somniel. But it's a situation where I'm using ladies that are just so much worse than some of the guy characters, which is not, I mean, it's just unfortunate because it's like the urge for me to not use the better character is it's hard. It's hard. So I'm struggling with characters like Lapis. La- I think that's how she says her name, Lapis.
That's a
Um,
bad name.
Lapis. But I got Kangetsu, and he's just so much fucking better, and it hurts to have to like bench him, bench like really awesome story characters because they're guys. But
For the
it,
piss.
it adds a little handicap, makes the game a little bit harder. Which, by the way, this game is quite a bit more challenging than any recent Fire Emblem game. I played a little bit of Conquest, and that was pretty challenging. But this is definitely like the most challenging Fire Emblem game I've played in a while. Um, and I mean, I'm really enjoying it. I talked about a little bit about last week, but I didn't really go into the nitty gritty. But this is the best on the field, I think, Fire Emblem game I've played to date because you have so many like interesting like tactical choices. And again, I didn't go into the nitty gritty, so I do want to call out some
Well,
specific things that make it a little cool. What's up, Nick?
well, real quick, when you first started to talk about this tonight, you kind of stopped yourself before you finished the sentence.
Yeah,
You
what
started
did I
saying
say?
something along the lines of, this is like, I don't remember what you said. You said like this is like I can now definitively say, or something along those lines. But then you stopped yourself. What were
Oh,
you gonna say?
what did I say? Oh, just
I
I
couldn't
don't
tell
know
if you were
what I was
gonna.
gonna say.
I couldn't tell if you were gonna go. This is like good or
Uh,
bad. I mean, it sounds like you're really
no,
enjoying
no, no.
yourself.
It's definitely good. I guess I didn't know the full extent of like sort of the backroom shit, which I guess is kind of what you're seeing here. Some of the stuff as I run
Right.
around the thumbnail. Um, so think this is the best like on the battlefield like Fire Emblem game, and I realized that last week, and now I more like concretely agree with that. But it's also the best I think backroom as well. Fire Emblem game, and what I mean by that is just the way you can kind of like tinker with and customize and like grow your characters for the battle, and it's just really addictive. Like when I go into battle after a battle, it's just like a rush of like, oh, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this. It's very addictive, and you just really get into like the rhythm of okay, well, I have enough SP to inherit this skill from this ring, but now I need to put this ring on this character because you inherit skills from the different emblems that you put on the different rings, and you really get into this rhythm of builds and stuff, right? Because of all the things you can tinker with, because of the skills you're inheriting from these emblems, because of like the different like classes that you're classing into, because of the different weapons you can buy, but you can also refine the weapons to make them better. But then you have these things called engravings, and each emblem has an engraving, and that can really significantly change the way a weapon like kind of plays out. And once you start like combining all this stuff together, you really get like a it's you really get a sense that you're kind of crafting a certain type of character for a battle. And you might get a like for example, hmm, what is a good example that makes sense? Let me give an early game example. Is there is a class? It's what one of the cool things that they did is they gave every class a class type, and
Hmm.
this has always been sort of like a loose thing in previous like Fire Emblem games, right? Where like flying characters were weak to like bows, and like mounted characters were weak to like like spears, or like anti-mounted weapons, right? Like certain class types had certain weaknesses, right? So you knew if you were taking a flyer in, or you got to watch out for certain things or whatever. Now they've given like every class like a class type, and it's definitely given like every different type of class like a certain role, which is like really cool. Like now you have all these classes that are like backup classes, and what that means is that they'll join in if they're nearby and do like assist attacks, right? But then they have all these like skills and stuff that can like modify that and like make that stuff really powerful. One of the new class types they have is like the is a class type that is given to like a healer, and they have the ability to do this thing called a chain guard, which so before a healer just basically like you used your heals and that was it, that was all you were really good for. But now they have this ability to do this thing called a chain guard, which means that they will block one hit from some like all around them. When they do a chain guard, all those enemies that they're in the middle of will like block one hit, right? Which is cool, right? But they take a little bit of chip damage. But the thing is, they have to be at full health to do a chain guard. So I inherited an ability from one of the emblems that made it to where every time I heal someone else, it also heals me for a percentage, right? But that's enough to top me off to get me back up to full health. So my next turn, I can do another chain guard, right? Which is something that before you would have to waste a turn like using an item on yourself instead of benefiting the team. Now I've crafted like a little mini build to where I'm always like topped off, so I can basically chain guard every other turn, which is a really powerful ability. And all this comes from like this new class type system and this new inheriting system, and that's just like a small little tiny tip of an iceberg that you could do in the very early game. And like late game, you're doing so much crazy shit with like with some of these abilities that you're inheriting from these emblems, which are like so fucking powerful. The thing I'm doing right now is there's this one emblem Sigurd who's one of the famous Fire Emblem characters, and he has the ability. It costs a lot, but if you really save up, you can inherit this ability called Canter, which makes it to where after you take your turn, you can move two spaces in any direction. You just have two free spaces you can move after your turn. And it might seem like a small thing, but like tactically, that's fucking huge because now you're putting squishies in ranges of like being able to do damage, but then getting out of the danger zone, right? Like,
Yeah.
which from a tactical perspective is a huge thing, right? Because normally, like the real danger of like a mage or like an archer is that they can get in close to maybe kill some other guy, but then they're going to get swarmed and killed. And now you have so much more like options to kind of get in and get out. And again, it's just a small thing, but like it's adding to like what you're seeing on screen is very absurd. This is the first time I've done it. It's like a just one of the mini games you can do.
Yeah, I was like,
It's
this doesn't look like
yeah,
Fire Emblem. You're like flying around the sky on a
it's
dragon with a
pointless.
skyward
I'm
sword.
specifically in this footage doing a bunch of random bullshit that I don't actually do, but I just thought it'd be funny to see. But other things, like the break system is really cool, because it lets you like stop counterattacks, right? If you hit them with the right weapon type. But like there's so much more to that. I think ever since they removed durability from the weapons in Fire Emblem, which was like a cool like thing to think about in the older games, right? You had to like it made every like decision considered, right? Because your weapons had durability. Now, in an effort to like give all the different weapon types that they've historically had in Fire Emblem games a purpose, they've really had to balance them in such a way to, like a killing edge. Or the killing type weapons, the killer type weapons were just weapons with like a really high critical hit rate, right? But the way they used to balance that out is like those weapons didn't have as much durability, so they would break a lot quicker, and you wouldn't get them as often, right? And because of that, you would kind of pull them out when you really needed them, right? Because eventually, when you used them all up, you don't have any more killer weapons, and that sucks, right? Because they had a really high crit chance. I think I did. I don't know if I said that. So they have a really chance of, high chance of doing a critical hit. Now, since weapons don't have durability, and if you have a killer weapon, you just always have it. They had to balance that out by making it not as strong or making the hit rate a lot lower. But you can like modify that with like the engravings, like I mentioned earlier, which is a really so like everything feels like it has a purpose, and
Chills.
it gives you a lot of things to think about when you're kind of outfitting your characters. They have these things called like great weapons, which I think are new to the series. I don't know. I've played a lot of Fire Emblem games, and these are weapons that are like really strong, but like the trade-off is that the enemy gets to take their turn first no matter what. And if they're going to do two attacks, they get to do both of those attacks before you hit them, right? But that weapon is such a strong hit, it also knocks them back. So you're actually like manipulating their positioning on the battlefield with these weapons, which in a tactical game is just giving you one more thing to think about, like tactically, to help kind of like gain the better positioning and all that stuff. And I even got into like all these like really powerful abilities that all the different emblems have, which are like significant, but it just gives you so many cool options on the battlefield. And this used to be a series where it was literally just moving dudes around, letting enemies attack your general, and you go in with, if they're using an axe, you go in with the sword guy, and if they're using a spear, you go in with an axe guy. It wasn't really that deep before. It was hard, but it wasn't that deep. And now it's like really like deep both in and off the battlefield, and it's hard. And I like that it's hard because it's really pushing me, and I've really like had to like really sort of do like some really smart like tactical retreats. And they have a staff now that lets you like create an obstruction on the battlefield, which I don't know if that was in past Fire Emblem games, but like being able to like create and block off like a part of the grid in a tactical game is such a huge thing. It might seem like such a minor thing, but you can get really creative with that stuff, especially when you're doing like a tactical retreat. Just to block off one square can mean like death, like a character lives or dies. And when you're
Right.
playing on classic, and those characters don't come back at the end of the battle, like that makes those situations really tense. And it's just, I like it. It's so good. um
Has your opinion
and
on the other side, on the other aspects of the game, changed at all since you've
what
been
is that other aspect though?
like? Well, I mean, you're spending like the footage we're watching is a lot more of like, I don't know if I would say social stuff, but I've seen you talking to other characters and like
Oh,
changing your
no, no, no,
clothes
no, no,
and
no, no. No, it's not really the social stuff. I mean, like supports have always been in like Fire Emblem. Like as far as like me doing that flying mini game, that's just bullshit. You can go
but
like
you've
pet
seen
your
more of the
cat.
story at this point, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's
How's that stuff?
lavishly produced cutscenes. They look beautiful, but like it's still like not like a really deep story. But like literally the only Fire Emblem game where I kind of even really cared maybe about the story was that the three houses. But that story gets pretty dumb in the back half as well. um Again,
Fair enough.
I can't stress it enough, but like the strength of Three Houses wasn't so much like the story and the characters, but it was just the cohesive nature of the way they brought it all together was better than any other Fire Emblem game. But what I'm saying is like the backroom stuff, the stuff that you're doing to tinker with your characters between battles, that stuff is really like addictive. I would say what I'm getting at is what I was suggesting last week is you don't actually have to spend a lot of time between battles tinkering with all this bullshit. But in reality, what I've come to realize is that I like doing all that, and I'm spending a lot of time like doing that backroom stuff between battles, and even like doing because I am playing on hard, doing some of the random battles to kind of like there's this one character. Her name's Anna. She's a merchant. She's a little girl, but she's also a merchant. She's in a lot of Fire Emblem games, and she comes with an axe, and she's like a physical fighter, and she's like not. But I looked online at her growth percentages, and she's really bad physical growth percentages, but she's got really, really good magic percentages, better than anyone in the game. Her magic growth stats, right? So it's like, well, she should not be using an X. She needs to be reclassed as a mage because she could be potentially the best mage in the fucking game. So I spent a lot of time like, getting her to a point to where I can reclass her and then leveling her up to where I can like, promote her class into like a proper mage class. And I just spent a lot of time dedicated to this character, like getting her up to snuff. Uh, Doing like random battles and stuff, but I was like really kind of hooked on that loop of like getting her enough SP to get this skill and like getting her enough experience to like get to the threshold to where I can go into the arena and like actually like see if it's a good level up. I'm saying that stuff's really good. And when I was playing Three Houses, the thought of doing a random battle like that was not a story battle made me want to put a fucking gun in my mouth. It was not good in that game. The
Damn.
battles were bad in Three Houses, and the thought of doing one that actually wasn't required sounded fucking awful. And I can't stress that enough. I like Three Houses a lot, but it's not good on the battlefield. And that is so important in a fucking Fire Emblem game. So when I say that like Fire Emblem Engage is the best like on battlefield experience and maybe the best backroom experience, what I'm saying is I think this is one of the best Fire Emblem games I've played. Now I still have a lot of nostalgia for like the GBA games. Like I'll never ever not miss that sprite work. Especially like the maps on the maps. I mean that style was so clean, so much better than what we have now. Even though like we were getting like beautiful 3D animations and stuff, I really do miss that stuff. And those games were hard and almost puzzle like in terms of how you accomplished a battle in those games. But and Three Houses was nice, whatever. It was a little Persona, it was a little Harry Potter, whatever the fuck. But I didn't like fighting the battles, and that's feels like a bad thing in a Fire Emblem game.
It seems
Um,
important for sure.
but here, yeah, I mean the story's still real fucking stupid, but again, don't let anybody fool you. Maybe it was okay in Three Houses. In Fates, it was fucking awful, right? In Awakening, it was only cool because there was time traveling children from the future, and before that, it was all honestly kind of throwaway. You liked characters like Hector just because he was cool and had a big axe. It was all I'm saying is
Hey, you had me at big beautiful
while I still
cutscenes, all
don't
right?
recommend it, well, I still don't recommend it to you specifically, Nick. If you're a Fire Emblem player out there
I told you last
and
week.
you've been on the
I'm not
fence
gonna
about
entertain the
Engage,
idea. I'm not gonna
if you've
entertain
been,
the idea of playing Engage until I finish Three Houses.
which
So
is
if I can get through
absurd
Three
technically,
Houses,
but
that
that's fine.
proves that like okay,
Again, it's more the
I can play.
realization that I just don't think the series is for you, and that's completely acceptable.
It
But there are
probably
people out
isn't.
there who have played and enjoyed Fire Emblem games, and I definitely think that those people should pick up
I mean,
Engage. It is really
the
cool.
main reason I picked up Three Houses in the first place is more of because it had those Harry Potter elements to it. You know, it had the school and
Yeah,
like the
but you also
students
tried
and
to play Awakening, right? On the 3DS?
yeah, I
Awakening,
did.
which was the
I
big
did.
kinda rebirth revival of Fire Emblem. Look,
Right.
dude, those are the 2 most famous ones at this point, besides maybe, like, Blazing Sword, right? If you can't get into Awakening and you can't get through 3 Houses, it's not the series for you.
But
Those are the ones.
I think I could get through Three Houses. It really wasn't an issue with me not
Well, let me
enjoying
tell
it. It
you,
was
the
something
back
else.
half of Three Houses is worse than the first half, so I don't know how far you got, but it wasn't gonna improve, it was just gonna get
Dang.
longer and more tedious.
Well, like I
Um
said, the reason I stopped that game had nothing to do with how much I was or was not enjoying myself. Chris Davis, you were going to say something.
That's absurd.
You had your hand up. What's
I mean,
going on?
I was going to ask, like, you're making that argument for Nick there, Brad, but what about me? What about somebody who's never played a Fire Emblem game and is curious about the franchise?
Three Houses. I think you should play Three Houses.
Okay.
Three Houses
All right.
seems to be the entry point for a lot of people.
I can't. Well, God, I mean, Three Houses is a lot too. Like, and I know Chris Davis, you don't like going backwards anyways. So whatever I tell you is not going to matter. You're asking me.
Necessarily.
Really, what you're asking me is if I recommend Engage to you, and the answer is I don't fucking know. Maybe, yeah. I mean, maybe if that's the only one you're going to play, maybe. Really, what I would probably recommend is maybe like I don't know, Sacred Stones or some shit. Go play a GBA game because those games were fucking cool, man. I don't know.
Okay.
Stay away from the GameCube
Chris
ones.
Davis likes to
Probably at
dig
this
into the
point.
past.
Yeah.
Play some of those older retro
I
experiences.
say the GameCube ones, but one of them's a Wii game. But
last
those are like
year,
prohibitively expensive. Those are both Portrait
What was the
Portrait of Ruin. That's a Castlevania game.
yeah?
Path of
What was the
Radiance and Radiant Dawn are like prohibitively expensive. Those are hundreds and hundreds of dollars both of those games now. So
Those are the GameCube games, right?
GameCube and a Wii game, yeah.
Last year, side story about Fire Emblem. Last year, I was driving through the bank, making a deposit, and I just picked up a game, and I was looking at it, in my hands. And the guy, the drive-through teller, was like, "Oh, what'd you pick up?" And I told him. He was like, "Oh, do you know anything about Fire Emblem?" Yeah, I'm a huge Fire Emblem fan. What game should I play? I asked him, and he said that I should pick up the seventh game that was on the Super Nintendo. So like,
no. He was saying Blazing Sword, which is Fire Emblem 7, which is the first one that came out for the GBA and the first one that was localized in the States, which I think is like a pretty good starting point. There was no seventh game for the Super Nintendo. There was one game on the Super Nintendo.
Okay.
I think
I remember something about Fire Emblem 7.
The seventh Fire Emblem game, which came out on the Super Nintendo.
Okay.
Right.
This was a year ago on a conversation I was only half paying attention to. So I'm just saying, I'm just saying, like, I'm willing to dive back into the past to figure out what the series is like.
Well, if you're willing to dive back into the past, maybe one of the GBA ones, the first ones that came out in the West, really. But the thing is, they've been remaking games, right? They remade Gaiden with Echoes, which was good, and the one everyone's been hoping that they remake is Genealogy of the Holy War, which is one where they did a lot of like really ambitious shit, and it's the one that they say actually has a good story, like a legitimately good story. So everyone's been kind of crossing their fingers that they remake that one, and I could see that happening, but it's like that would be like a significant task.
I hope they give it a different name because that is awkward.
That's a big long name.
Yeah.
Big, long, awkward name.
Blazing Sword or Binding Blade, maybe Fire Emblem 6. I don't know, but whatever. It's
you got options. That's the point.
Okay.
All right. Anything else you want to say about Fire Emblem before we
just that
it's pretty good.
No, it's more than pretty good. It's just it's weird coming off of Three Houses where I guess you could consider them deficiencies, but that's only if you ignore all the things where it's actually a lot better. So it's a weird situation for sure. I almost kind of want to like draw an analogy somewhere, but what's the point of that? But I'm sure the situation has existed in some other franchise. I just hope that maybe the next game is like Three Houses, but actually fun in battle. Maybe but you got to say different developers technically.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
I do think there's. I mean, as someone who hasn't played this, it does strike me as Engage being a game that does certainly seem like it's trying to take certain cues from Three Houses.
No. See, that's where you're wrong. They were doing this shit since Awakening. Three Houses didn't invent this kind of shit that you're seeing right now.
Okay.
This is it's not.
I don't claim to be an expert on the Fire Emblem franchise. I just know that like Three Houses was the first one that like jumped out at me as something I really wanted to play because of the
Because
stuff
it was
that
the
I'm looking at
really
right here.
popular, huge
Yeah,
one, mostly because of the Switch, but and it was yeah.
you just picked up horse manure in this game.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you can gift that to people, but I still don't know who. I haven't looked up any gift guides or anything. I haven't really
Why?
given them any gifts,
Who thought
but
that was a good
somebody out there
idea?
probably likes horse manure.
She did. All right, let's move on. We want to touch on this this topic of the week, which we like to do here at 4playernetwork.com
I
on
like
the
to consider it
podcast.
our community topic of the week.
Yeah, we like to pick through conversations that seem to be getting a lot of traction in our Discord. Which, of course, if you're not in there, please join us at discord.gg/4player. Yeah, we like to keep an eye on what's hot in Discord and bring it into the show and talk about it each week. It's been kind of a hectic time in the industry lately. This is kind of a twofold conversation here. One, there seems to be and Brad, you posted a list of this earlier. I don't know. I'm not sure if you have it handy, but there's been
I
kind
do.
of
I do.
a sudden culling of a bunch of games as a service games, as in
Well,
like
no, it's
they're
just a timing thing. Maybe it has to do
Yeah.
with the beginning of the year or whatever. But I
they're
think
pulling the plug on all these, right?
they're pulling the plug on all these, right? I think the ones from the past week that were more like, I guess, sort of shocking to people was Rumbleverse, which was a battle royale game, kind of that was like the theming was more like wrestling moves and stuff, but like people
Yeah,
seem to like really enjoy it
Yeah.
because
that's
of
the one
Iron
I've seen pop
Galaxy
up on
game.
my feed more than anything.
That
Is
was
Rumbleverse.
Iron Galaxy.
Yeah, which
Mm.
launched not that long ago, but apparently not successful enough to exist, right? Which is the thing. And I think just the past day or whatever, we learned out that Knockout City, which was that dodgeball game that we played.
Played
We
that and
had
it
did
was
a community
cool.
night. Yeah, it was a cool game. Knockout City, they're shutting that down, and in just another long list. I mean, and it was just a list of like in the past week. I can list it off, but Apex Legends Mobile, Battle Royale, Battlefield Mobile, Crime Site, Crossfire X, which I think used to be huge in parts of the world.
Well,
A
the real problem with Crossfire X is that they're taking it from sale immediately, and by doing that, they're taking away the campaign that Remedy made for single player.
Oh wow.
I'm just
I
saying
heard that
that's
wasn't very
the
good,
one attractive
but
Oh,
point.
whatever.
that's that game.
Yeah,
I
Crossfire
forgot
X,
about that.
Dragon
Yeah,
Quest: The Adventure of Dai, which whatever, I don't know what that was. Echo VR, I don't know what that is. Love Live, School Idol Fest. On top
the
of
Love Live game
Rumbleverse
is a
and
gotcha
Knockout
game that's
City.
actually 10 years old. Most gotcha games last only like maybe 3-4 years maximum, so it's remarkable how long it survived.
But the point is, this was just in the past week. These were just games as a service games that were announced to be hitting end of life. And then recently we heard Avengers was a bigger one that's gonna like end and go away.
Mhm.
And it, like you were saying, like it's weird because you think of something like Avengers, and one of the redeeming things I heard about that was its like sort of story mode or whatever,
Yeah.
like the story campaign was actually like pretty decent, but I think that just goes away, right? I don't know.
I
Um,
mean, I don't think that's the kind of thing where you can
I mean,
just shut down a certain
it's a
part of
game
it.
that they're pulling from digital stores. Like you're not going to be able to buy it, so it's like they're, and it's just
I
kind of
do feel like the writing has been on the wall for a while about Avengers. Um,
sure, but what I'm saying is these games aren't being given. I mean, when you think about
I think
maintaining.
this style of game has a very short window of time for it to prove itself
Okay, but
before.
my question is why? Well,
That's a good
why
question. That's a viable
like
question. I
why? And this is sort of what I've been thinking about, and kind of why I want to bring it up is like how come like a multiplayer game has to be significant to even exist? It didn't always used to be like this, right? People just used to make a multiplayer game. A certain amount of people played it. It wasn't a lot, but it didn't just fucking go away, right? Right? Now
yeah.
I feel like if like everyone's chasing Fortnite, and if you don't try to get something that blows up, then it's a failure. Like
I mean,
is
I
are
think
these
it's a
things too
combination of
expensive
things.
to run
I think it
or
is a combination of things, and I think one of the biggest factors. Well, obviously, I think one of the factors is is money, and I think companies, publishers, if you know, if you look at like quarters or you know, yearly or annual sales and whatnot, and like they underperform and they can attribute a lot of that failure to a particular game, the writing's on the wall. But perhaps more importantly, like you said with Fortnite, like everybody's chasing that Fortnite popularity, and if you can't even come like and honestly it like outside of like Call of Duty maybe until Fortnite came along, I feel like there wasn't a lot of like there wasn't a juggernaut. You know what I mean? And now you have Fortnite, you have why the fuck am I blanking on the name of the
Warzone,
game? No, the Bethesda
Elder Scrolls
oh
Online,
my no, the shooter, the multiplayer with the heroes that Crispy played. They just announced there's a sequel coming. Oh my god.
Overwatch.
Overwatch, thank you. Like you have
that's
Fortnite.
Activision.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, Activision. My apologies. But you have you have Fortnite, you have Overwatch, uh, and you know then you
Destiny.
can Destiny. Yeah, but like those are all wildly successful. And now it's just it's kind of like think about like Square Enix and the way they treat like Tomb Raider was a failure because it didn't sell. What was that absurd number they set for themselves? Like 10 million copies or something like that.
I think it was like
And
eight
it's
million
like
something.
I think it all comes down to like companies chasing the wild, unlikely overnight successes of Fortnite and in these games. And if they don't come close to it, they'll like scrap it and try again. Like we have to find that fucking game. And if we
But I mean, I
don't,
don't understand. Is it like more expensive to run servers these days than it was like 15, 20 years ago? Is that why
It's not
something
that.
can't exist for more than a fucking year
No, like
if it's not
there's like
enormous?
there are games that are getting shut down. I one was announced like today is getting shut down. I forget what it was called, but they announced that the PC version they're going to let players do private servers still.
That's
That's going to
Knockout
last.
City, I think.
Yeah, okay, Knockout City, but that's the thing is that if you're going to develop these games and they're going to be live service games that you're going to be connecting to a server all the time, like it's just more expensive for them to develop a client end server architecture for them to just play
gotta have that
offline or
gotta have
privately.
that infrastructure on the
So
back end.
I
Yeah.
think this
It's
is
just
I think this is
development dollars and
related.
putting it into it.
I think this is related, but you know, Redfall, we were talking about in the Discord as well.
Right.
After we had watched the Microsoft thing. But I mean, that looks more and more like a games as a service game. We found out that it has to be online, always online. Is
Yes.
this going to be one of those games that if it's not hugely successful, it's all just going to go away? Are we not going to be? They're telling us it's like, oh, it's a good single player arcane game, but like, is this going to be something that just goes away
That
if
is
the
a
game
very good
bombs?
question. That's a very
Same
good
thing
question.
for like same things for like Justice not Justice League's Suicide Squad, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a game that is we know is games as a service has a battle pass. Is it just gonna be something that goes away if it's not hugely successful like Avengers? I mean that's a fucking Rocksteady game. It's a thing they've been working on for so long and they're fucking Rocksteady. And now it's a crossing our fingers hoping that it catches on as a games as a service. You know, when that screenshot leaked and everyone was kind of talking shit, one of the things about it was that all the characters had guns in their hands. They all had guns in their hands, and including the giant fucking shark man had a gun in his hand, who's just a shark. Who I saw that movie and he just fucking bites people because he's a fucking shark man, right? But
But
in the video game, he has a gun, and I think it's because they're, they're like, well, this has to be a shooter at its core because we're not gonna like compete with something like Fortnite if this isn't like a shooter
Oh
and we
my
could sell them a
god.
bunch of gun skins and shit.
You're
And
making me
sure, they're
really
gonna
nervous
have
about this. Why did I bid on
sure
that?
he's gonna
Or
have
why
a
did I
fucking
draft that?
ground pound or whatever because he's a bruiser. But this just it feels more like a Borderlands thing, right? Like it's still the core of it feels like it's going to be shooting because I feel like that's going to reach the most people. That's
Oh
going
my
to be what the
god.
most people understand, and not some weird. Because look at the games they're shutting down. Rumbleverse, Knockout City, those are games that tried to be more than just shooters, right? That they tried to be, you know, like a weird brawler game or a weird dodgeball game, and now they're going away because people don't want the unique oddball stuff, because the unique oddball stuff is not gonna blow up and go like massively mainstream. And I think that's why Suicide Squad has guns in it, because the fringe stuff like Let It Die or whatever is not gonna blow up. And if it doesn't blow up, it doesn't need to exist apparently,
I
and they're
think
just gonna kill it.
we are seeing. I think we are seeing um, kind of the fallout of
Fallout
this.
76.
Yeah, sure. I think we're seeing kind of the fallout of this industry mindset, which is not sustainable. Um,
But it's what people want, because it's the only it's what these companies want, because it's the only thing that's gonna make money over
right.
years and years and years.
Because
But it's
well, I mean,
they're
they're
miserable
all
failures.
potentially. I mean, it just seems to me like the bar needs to be a little bit lower in terms of like financials, right? Because I do think the bar right now is unbelievably high because of the success of Fortnite. And because if your game does not compete with Fortnite, it's not going to last. That's just because they're not willing to let it last.
It's
Because
not even
even though they're
competing with
making,
Fortnite, and it's not just Fortnite.
I know I'm
It's
using
there's more
Fortnite
than that.
because
There's like
I'm
Apex
using.
Legends.
I
There's like
know. I'm
Rainbow
just
Six Siege. There's stuff out there that people are chasing, but it is
sure.
the kind of like forever game.
Right,
They're
right. They are
chasing forever
chasing.
games.
They're chasing the forever game, but they're also chasing the forever games that have like that is wildly successful. Fortnite is one I'm using as the prime example because it's obviously the most recognizable
Lifestyle games, even.
Yeah.
lifestyle games, right?
I mean,
Everybody's chasing that massively
the
successful lifestyle game, and until the industry as a whole is willing to say, look, a game can be successful and we can be proud of it, even if it's not a quote unquote lifestyle game. If it's not, but like
the thing about a live service game is that it is a service. You cannot just launch it and just keep it going through cosmetic drops. You have to keep doing content. You have to drip it and keep that stuff pretty much constant. And if you do not have the additional revenue coming in from this game, from players just kind of bouncing off it or eventually just dropping off, uh, and you can't fund the continued development of that extra content. So at a certain point, a developer or publisher is going to have to look at the numbers and say, this is unsustainable after X date. That's just going to happen with this stuff.
I'm also thinking about
there's
something
there's a
like
difference between no longer making new content and shutting it down altogether, which
Yeah,
is
no,
the scary
that
part.
is a flawed thinking with these publishers in that they don't think about longevity. The live service games, they're live until they are dead. There's no in between, unfortunately.
there should be a scale, you know what I mean? But like I'm also thinking about like The Division. Like that was a game that had legs. And I
Yeah.
also don't think it was like the most like maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that was like the most successful in terms of uh like size, like audience size or player base, you know what I mean? Like I
Yeah, no, with the
but
division
they kept it
itself,
going.
yeah,
And that's
they
still
kept it
going, right? Like
they kept it going because Ubisoft has that diversified developer structure to where they can just have entire
they have
teams
tons
or
of
studios
studios.
spread out across the world to answer whatever need they need from a game. That's why Siege has been so powerful in that they distributed the development and they got content constantly coming for it. There's always a new character coming. There's always a new event coming. There's Siege is here to stay until they make a sequel.
So
The
who published Knockout City? Is that
uh,
EA, I think.
EA?
no,
Well,
I thought it was Sony. Am I crazy?
maybe somebody in chat knows. No, I don't think it was Sony because it was on. I mean,
No, it was EA.
okay, yeah, it was EA, yeah. Which
Yeah.
and EA, that's a whole other conversation because EA has been making questionable development and
Yeah, but
management
they've
choices
also
for
been doing
ages.
stuff like Dead Space again, and Jedi
They're
Fallen Order
sure
and
Yeah.
stuff,
they're
right?
starting to
Which
make
are
better decisions. They're certainly starting to make better
So
decisions. But Chris
they
Davis has
I
a good point. They don't have the same size developer infrastructure. Like they don't have the
backing
same numbers.
architecture to develop this
Like
content.
Ubisoft has an army of development studios all over the world, and I
Yeah.
don't. I'm EA has lots of studios, but like I don't think they have anywhere near as many studios. I might be
The,
pulling this out of my ass,
I think
but
we're
I don't
gonna
think they have
learn.
nearly as many studios as Ubisoft
I think
does.
we're gonna learn in the next couple years that the Ubisoft thing is not sustainable. I
oh
feel
yeah,
like,
no, we're already seeing the cracks with Ubisoft. That system
yeah,
is on the verge of collapsing at this point if they
yeah,
don't get
I
it
think it's
together in the
gonna
next few years.
when that collapses, I think it's gonna be real
Yeah.
bad.
Real quick, I did want to mention about Knockout City. EA published the game at launch, but afterwards, in June of 2022, the developer took over publication rights. So they've been supporting their own game without EA support since June 2022.
So maybe they don't have the funds to keep it going.
Yes,
I don't know.
that is a
So,
good chance of that.
and it just happens to be rolled. The timing is it's rolling into this big thing. But
Yeah.
there's also other sides to this I wanted to talk about because we're not just talking about this games as a service thing. There's also been some big shakeups at 343 and the future of Halo as a platform, as a series, which kind of blows my mind. The fact that it's kind of in question now. There was a report. There were reports initially that 343 was going to be focusing solely on multiplayer Halo content, and that Halo Infinite was pretty much done as far as single player content goes, right? And
Which
that
is a
Halo,
disaster, right? Because
but
Infinite was supposed to be a platform for a service, right? And it
Yeah.
yeah,
seems like that was a flop, and not a flop as something big enough to be a like we were saying, it's got to be big
it
enough to
seems
be a
crazy to
to
me that that
giant,
Halo.
or it doesn't can't exist.
It seems crazy to me that Halo can't make a success, like can't become a
No, it
successful.
can. It just can't do it as a service. Like
No,
Halo
that's
has
what I
never
mean.
been as big as Microsoft wants it to be. You
Which
know,
is
it
crazy
was
because Halo has been like one of the most popular game franchises in the world for decades now.
And they've
and
been
it hasn't been
Microsoft.
that in about a decade. It
I,
hasn't been as significant as other stuff out there in like a decade. It just hasn't.
you also have to remember that Microsoft with Xbox and they've been trying to do live service content for Halo since Halo 4. Because Halo 4 had the Spartan Ops multiplayer content that was drip fed and tried to keep players coming back and back and back and back. They also tried to do it with Halo 5, and now they thought they had perfected it with Infinite. The problem with Infinite is that when your main property controller, 343 Industries, outsources most of the development to third party contracted houses, you get distributed development without unity of vision and control. So you run into management issues, and evidently, management issues is one of the largest complaints about 343's control over Halo Infinite since it was announced. Been just such a turnover in management and such a lot of toxicity there that nobody really has control over a lot of the fundamental vision of what Infinite was supposed to be. To your
So,
notes about single player, real quick, with Halo.
mhm.
The initial reports were that 343 was canceling single player DLC content for Infinite. Reports since then have said that that was never even in development in the first place. So
Wow.
where they are at with actual single player right now, nothing is
Nobody
publicly
knows.
known.
Which is, I mean, I know Halo, its bread and butter kind of has always been its multiplayer. So it
God,
sounds like,
man. Speaking
but
of shadow drops, I feel like when it comes to Halo Infinite, like the biggest, hypest, happiest people have been was when they first dropped that multiplayer early and it was free and they gave it to everyone. And for about like a week or two, everyone was on cloud nine and thought, they could do no wrong with Halo and Microsoft was amazing. And
I
now it's
still think it's
just
dude. I still think it's a
such
shame
a
because I
different
still think
world.
I I I loved Halo Infinite. It's single player. Um, I haven't been that enthused about single player Halo in quite a while. And but I also went into it knowing that I was just like this whole thing, calling it a platform and calling and wanting to like extrapolate, like this is like they're just going to keep adding single player content to this platform for like 10 years. I was like, there's no way. There's
They're
no
gonna
way
try
they're
to
going to
do it with
deliver on
Assassin's
that.
Creed, right? They're
I
gonna
mean,
try to do Assassin's
yeah. I
Creed
mean, literally, isn't it called Assassin's Creed Infinite? Like, isn't that?
Infinity.
yeah, that's
Well,
basically it's a unifying platform. Yeah.
it's a unified, but here's the difference because Assassin's Creed Infinite, I don't think is a game. You're not going to pop a disc in to play Assassin's Creed Infinite. It's just kind of like a platform that you use to access these other singular games. Halo Infinite seemed like they've established this kind of like open world Halo game, and they're just going to keep building and building and building on it, adding new missions, adding new like side stories, expanding the universe and stuff by like adding to this one singular thing.
Yeah.
So they're not exactly the same, but it like I remember playing Infinite and being like, God, this is really good, but like I just I don't believe them. I don't think I believe that this is going to have the legs that they think it has, and that seems to be coming true. Oh no, we lost Brad.
Well, I did want to mention real quick about Infinite. The one thing that is known is that it's not Creative Assembly. It's what's the other one that's in town?
In town, like in Austin.
Yeah.
Oh god.
I don't remember I'm having a
Aspire, Arcane,
it was an A. It was whatever. I can't think of the name right now. It'll come to me later.
another A.
One of the main contracted development houses based out of Austin for Infinite has been long at work on a new component to Infinite. A lot of the rumors said armature. Thank you. It has been strongly suggested that this might be like their own take on a battle royale experience. But it may be more kind of single player oriented in that regard. Like how you do a battle royale single player. I don't know how you do it, but
I don't know, man. I just wish this industry and Halo or and 343. I wish they would just kind of get back to the fucking what's going on with Brad? I don't know.
I have no idea.
We should get back to the basics. Why not just make fucking Halo 6 and have a single player and a multiplayer mode, maybe a battle royale mode in there, and then like wrap development on that and move on to the next thing. I don't understand why they had like. I mean, I get it. I guess I get it. Everybody's excited because of this new trend, this new technology, and that makes these service games possible. But like, god damn, how often do these things have happy endings? It seems like almost never. It's just it's such a fucking bummer.
It absolutely is. I mean,
maybe that's a bad way to end this conversation, but it is.
If you're going to make a live service game, it is such a dramatic gamble for how much money you have to put into making it. And if you do not have a hit formula that has a sustainable audience, and you cannot continuously drip feed content for players that keeps them coming back over and over again,
you're not going to know that ahead of time.
You're not going to know that. You're not even going to be able to predict that years in advance. 5 weeks in advance, you wouldn't even know it before launch.
We've had this conversation before, and it always comes back to, it seemingly always comes back to like the answer to this seems to be stop thinking that all of your single player games have to be fucking 100 hours long with an infinite amount of content that takes 6 years to develop. Like, get back to like the 2 to 3 year production cycle. Scale back the size of your games. Just focus on making smaller, more polished games experience, and people I feel will flock to them. And maybe that's just
Rush is not going to keep a company like Microsoft happy.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like the bar is not going to keep them in business. High. The bar is too. They're too fucking greedy, man. The bar is too high.
Lower the bar. Capitalism is the problem.
Yes, fucking capitalism is the fuck. There we go.
There it is.
Let's move on. We've finally figured it out. Capitalism is the fucking worst. Okay,
the problem is going to be that every time we have a topic of the week, that's going to be the ultimate answer.
Yeah. Let's see how we can ultimately reach the same conclusion next week on episode 746. Tune in for that. But for now, let's wrap up the show with the 4-player minute. Y'all know how this works. Hype, sweat, whatever the fuck you want to do. Final thought, Brad, go.
My final thought, my 4-player minute, is going to be about a certain Forspoken combo video that got posted in Discord, and the title was like, maybe game journalists didn't know how to play Forspoken. That was like the title or some shit.
Oh,
And
That's
then it was
maybe how
just
I
a
enjoyed it.
combo video, right? It was just one of those crazy combo mad videos, right? Of just like, this is how I play Forspoken. Soon he legend shit, right?
Right.
It's just funny to me because people see that and they're like, yeah, game journalists don't play like that. But, you know, they act like everyone that's not a game journalist plays games like that. And that's just not true. If a
Yeah.
game journalist is playing a game poorly, they're probably more representative of like the mainstream average person, not like this
It's like if soon
YouTuber
he
that, yeah.
it's like if soon he legend was like game journalists don't play games like this. It'd be like, yeah, no shit, nobody does. You're
Have you
fucking
ever
crazy.
have you ever heard Sunhee Legend like go off on like how much time he spends, the hours and hours he'll spend setting up one of his videos? It's insane. It just Chris Davis, I think you're muted.
no,
Um,
I didn't say anything.
it's it is a nice video, and Forspoken, when played at a high level, looks really nice. But to expect like the average game player who's like reviewing a game to play it like that, to put in the hours, to even want to put in the hours to like make like crazy combos to make a game look really cool is absurd. That's absurd, and I feel like people should stop seeing that stuff and then saying, "Yeah, that's what it looks like when I play it."
And you're also setting
100% of the
yourself up
time.
for disappointment, right? Like if I watched the Sunhee Legends video and then was like, "Oh man, I can't wait to play this," I'd be disappointed like almost every time.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's not the baseline.
And let me tell you, it doesn't fucking matter, y'all. That's not why the game got bad reviews. Like when I played Devil May Cry, it doesn't look like Sunhee Legend. And yeah, the game is capable of doing that ridiculous shit, but like I'm not doing that stuff necessarily, and I'm sure critics weren't doing that stuff either, but they still gave it a good score. Maybe Forspoken got bad scores because it sucks for lots of reasons, not just the fact that critics couldn't do these combos. So I don't know,
or
maybe ease up
or
a little.
maybe this is just me being hopeful. The critics were wrong.
No, they're right.
I'm only
Forspoken
saying that
sucks,
because I spent the money and I bought it today. Okay,
which
just
is
let me
still
have this.
crazy, but fine. Sure, I hope you like it. I really do, but you better actually play it. I don't want it just to be something
Game of
that
the
sits on your shelf.
year.
That's no one is gonna award it
Nobody
here.
said that.
Stop it.
Everybody said that about Days Gone too, and look where we are.
It's funny. I hate to extend my 4-player minute by talking about this Dead Space remake, but
Oh
one of the
God.
things I was saying is like it can't win. It's not going to win a Game of the Year award. It shouldn't win Game of the Year awards. It owes too much to that original game, which is true. I
You can
believe
put it in a
I
top
believe it's
10.
true.
You can put it in a top 10.
Sure you could put it in a top 10, but I'm saying you're not going to see outlets giving it their Game of the Year. You just won't. And I sort of did a little bit of research, and I looked at like these threads that are on Era that track like hundreds and hundreds of video game outlets from all over the world, and like will list out their Game of the Years, right? And notoriously, or not, if famously, last year, like Elden Ring, it was just absurd. Like literally 80% of outlets gave it to Elden Ring, which is it's never been that much of a sweep, maybe even more. And I looked at the year that the Demon Souls remake came out, which, by the way, Demon Souls, it's a great game. We know it's a great video game. What are you trying to say? Blue Point didn't do enough work on Demon Souls, Chris Davis? I see your fucking face.
My memory's fading for me because I haven't played it in so long, Brad.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. That year, I looked at it. It was like around 550 outlets. They had their Game of the Years from 550 outlets. Demon Souls won one out of like 500 plus. One of those outlets gave Demon Souls their Game of the Year. Now, are you telling me that Demon Souls is not worthy of getting a Game of the Year? Or maybe the outlets did not feel that a remake, even a nice, beautiful, significant one like the one Bluepoint did, deserves credit for being a remake as a Game of the Year. And what I'm thinking is when it comes to the Dead Space remake, even though there's lots of cool new things, it still owes way too much to that original design, that original art style, that original combat, that original everything, that it's not deserving of a Game of the Year. It's just not.
Don't take the
Also,
bait, Chris Davis. Let me just stop you there. Don't take the
And you know
bait.
what? I don't think you're gonna give it Game of the Year. I just don't. Like I think at the end of the year, when you're looking at shit like fucking Silk Song and Tears of the Kingdom and Starfield, whatever the fuck, you're not gonna be like, yeah, but Dead Space Remake, did you see that AI director? It's the best original work of the year. You're not gonna. It might get close for you. It might be high up on your list, but you know it doesn't deserve to win any Game of the Year
Can-
awards.
You know what?
You know
You know what the Dead Space remake is? It's a perfect number 10.
Maybe it's better than number 10. But you know what? I will say I do think Resident Evil 2 Remake was much more justified in winning those awards, and it did win some of them, because that, at the end of the day, did feel like an original work, and more or less it was done by Capcom as well, so it was
Bradley
their own
Simons
game, kind of.
in
No one's going to say
2020.
Motive is better at making video games than Visceral, because they just fucking, tuned
Okay,
up a project that already existed.
Brad, you're don't do it, Chris Davis. What were you gonna
No,
say?
no. I mean, I don't think anyone would disagree with me there, right? Everything I said was reasonable.
No, I think you're very reasonable. I'm just warning. Chris Davis and myself have sometimes had a tendency to take the bait. And this is a
It's
four. This is a
not
four.
bait.
This is a 4-player minute. This is a four. I can already see it on his face. He wants to come
It's
to the
not
game's
bait. It
defense.
is truth that I'm speaking.
He wants to come to its defense, and all I'm saying is maybe it's not necessary here. But
Are
Chris
you
Davis,
saying Hi-Fi Rush is less deserving than a fucking remake?
I think on their own merits, I think they're both excellent games, and I
Not
consider
denying.
it personally that both could be Game of the Year contenders.
I didn't give Tactics Ogre, even though Tactics Ogre is one of my favorite games of all time, and they did a lot of work in Reborn. I did not give it any of my awards last year, because I thought it wasn't fair. I mean, you can't give fucking art design to Dead Space Remake. They didn't even make that art. That's art design made by artists from Visceral. It's bullshit. But whatever. We got to stop. I'm
Okay,
sorry. That's the end of my
yeah,
4-player minute.
Brad. You think? Okay, Chris Davis.
I should have muted you for that
Go
entire
off.
4-player minute.
It's your turn now, Chris Davis.
Well, I would like to start by correcting the record with the Demon Souls remake, Brad. I would like to list for you just 3 games that came out that year against it. Okay? Number 1, Hades. Number 2, Half-Life Alyx. Number
Yeah.
3, The Last of Us Part 2.
And those all won lots and lots of awards.
Yes,
Demon Souls won 1 out of 550. 1.
And you are
What is the
discount.
percentage? And you're telling me Demon Souls is not like
I hate
an
both of
amazing
you right
fucking
now.
game? That's a landmark game.
If you say
Are you
one
telling
more
me it's
word,
not-
I am muting
You're telling
you.
me Demon Souls is not as good as
I'm muting you now. Okay. Brad is now muted. We cannot hear him. The moment belongs to me. My 4-player minute is, first off, a fuck you to this Bradley Simons guy. How dare he? Not only for his insolence with keeping my copy of Demon Souls for 2 years now, but also for disparaging Dead Space 2 Remake. This game that he hasn't even beaten half of. He doesn't know. He doesn't understand what else is there. I understand Brad is not a narrative guy. He's never been. The worst thing in his life that he could possibly do is have to read through text on a screen from characters talking to one another. He hates that shit. He doesn't have time for it. Unless they have voices and really nice voices, he is skipping through that dialogue unless he is just 100% invested. Like, I don't understand that man. He is crazy. Let's ignore him for a second. Dead Space, the remake, is an excellent game. Everyone here should play it, even if you're not a horror game guy. Everything they have done in this game feels transcendent to me, to the original experience. If you go back and compare, it is a night and day comparison as to the quality and what they bring in every single aspect. I think Motive did an excellent job. Moving on. I also want to give a shout out to Hi-Fi Rush. Again, that game is an excellent example of a shadow drop done right. Every aspect of that game is fantastic. The story is fun. The writing is fun. The characters are well voiced. It is so beautifully animated. This is such an excellent example of cell shading in a game done right. Uh, I am so surprised. I don't play character action games. I really don't. I haven't played a Devil May Cry game since 3, and I bounced off of 3. I think I could go into the story again, but Team Ninja broke me when it came to character action games. But I have fallen in love with this game, and I really wish I could double dip or even triple dip. I wish there was a physical copy that I could go out and purchase right now at a store, which is very sad to think about, but that's a whole other conversation. I guess my 4-player minute is just me rambling on and on. Brad, you're still muted. I'm not letting you speak to the people. This is going up on the VOD, and too bad for you. I just wish that, number one, I could mute Brad more often. And number two, that everyone could play both of these games. These are two of the best games of this year so far. I think that they're easily top 10 material. I think they could easily be on a lot of people's consideration for Game of the Year. I will now unmute, and Nick can have his 4-player minute.
It's basically January. Well, it's
Yes.
February, but... So yeah, those are two of the best games of the year.
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna try and break the... I'm not gonna respond to Chris Davis's rant.
Wait, am I unmuted now?
For now, I can fix that real quick.
Let me just. I'm gonna shift gears here. I'm not gonna utter the word the name Dead Space.
I feel like I wasn't being unreasonable.
you
whatever.
Okay. My 4-player minute. I just want to give. I want to call out the latest episode of The Last of Us on HBO, which was absolutely beautiful. Just holy shit. Never thought in a million years this show would go. Would. It's weird seeing a show like this be so faithful to the source material, but also finding just the most incredible ways to expand upon it. Yeah, I was complete. Robin and I were both completely floored. Everyone I've talked to since that episode was completely floored by that episode, and
well, you haven't talked to me, Nick.
I know I haven't talked to you, Brad.
So I'm running out of time. It's almost 11. So
I know.
You win this one. Damn you.
Yes. Ha. The day is mine. No. Yeah. I don't know. What is there to say about it other than, I mean, people have been talking. It's weird too watching The Last of Us be everywhere now, right? Like it is officially broken out of the gaming ecosystem,
and deservedly so. It's everywhere.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it absolutely deserves to be, and it's. I said this going into this show that if this was a success, one of the most exciting things to me as a fan was going to be finally being able to talk to other people who have never experienced a story about it. Because
have you talked to any of those people?
I have. Yes, I absolutely have. In fact, Joel and his wife, of course, Joel has never played it. He's always wanted to, but he's never played it. And his wife knows nothing about The Last of Us at all. She doesn't really play games. And we're all watching this and talking about it and texting each other and stuff. And it's been the most amazing experience so far. And I think that's really, really wonderful. And they've made some really creative, really exciting changes to not only the story, but the lore, while at the same time being incredibly faithful, like almost to a T, like using the same dialogue, some of the same shots. It's just like beat for beat telling the same story while also having these wild divergent moments and introducing new things. Like they introduced this whole aspect of the fungus that doesn't exist in the game. That now I'm like, damn, if they make a third game, I want them to fucking do that in the game, because it sounds like that could be a really cool component, like gameplay component. And like it's wild. I can't believe this is happening, and it's blowing up
true.
like this.
It's true. And now we know why they made a somewhat, middle effort remake of Last of Us Part 1 and sold it for $70 because they are making a lot of money right now.
They are making a lot of money on that for sure, for sure. But
I
Joel
gotta
also,
go.
bye, Brad. But Joel does now want to play The Last of Us because he's never done it. And yeah, so like it's cool. It's cool seeing it's cool seeing The Last of Us on Saturday Night Live. And that was the weirdest, most surreal fucking thing in the world. Like what? It's crazy, and I think it's making for an exciting season of television, and I couldn't be happier that it seems to be working out so far. So that's my 4-player minute. Brad has left us, has broken our stream
Yeah, I gotta
because
fix it
it's
real
11
quick.
o'clock. So I'm gonna go ahead and close the show out, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for listening. As always, if you're new, check us out at 4playernetwork.com. But more importantly, join us on Discord at discord.gg/4player. We're in there all the time talking about video games and movies and TV shows and all that stuff. Yeah, hopefully we'll have at least one other person with us next week. We usually have at least 4 people. It's been 2 weeks where it's just me, Brad, and Chris. But I think we did an admirable job.
A
And,
literal act of God happened to prevent us from having a 4-person podcast this week.
Yes,
so.
a literal act of God happened this week. So join us again next week for a new episode. And in the meantime, guys, be good to each other, be safe, play video games, and good night.
Bye.